seen 65 countries joining this, but of course there are challenges. For example, some countries have second thoughts about whether it is a debt problem for their infrastructure building. Others worry about whether there is enough transparency in all those projects. What do you make of the progress of this initiative?
Well, actually, just to clarify, right, since the initiative was being unveiled in 2013, we have seen quite a bit shift on the policy front. What I believe is the initiative has become more expensive, not just 65 countries or 64 countries. Actually, is about any country who is willing to engage with China in building infrastructure in less developed countries. And Japan actually is a prime example. So in the past 5 years, we really have seen quite profound shift. So the initiative has become more inclusive. The example which you have shown from the documentary, for example, Central China and Germany, if you look at this vast of land in between, many of the economies were landlocked economic growth has been constrained by lack of infrastructure development. Thailand is another example, is a fast-growing economy having a very strong relationship with China, and that's a natural extension for China's outbound investment. Japan, China is the second largest economy, Japan is the third largest economy, but many years ago Japan was the second largest economy and China was not even the third or the fourth. Now these two countries have decided to learn how to live together. I think that's very important because both China and Japan, they have immense savings and they need to explore their surplus of saving. And I think a country like Thailand would be a perfect place
use
for
their
them to work
resources
together.
and expertise in developing theirs.
Sure.
Bert, very shortly, how do you think the impact of this initiative on the rest of the world?
Well, my president, Jim Yong Kim, named this one of the most exciting development initiatives in the past few decades. And our studies show that there could be a major net benefit. Of course, projects would have to be chosen with care, financing would have to be sustainable, and environmental and social concerns would have to be addressed. So, and finally, you see that it's not just infrastructure that matters, but it's also policies along the roads. Half of the gains come from better policies at customs clearance and transit times that are as important as the infrastructure itself. So both on the policy front as well as on the infrastructure front, a lot of work to be done to realize that potential that the Belt and Road has.
Yes, indeed. As we
Certainly.
Chinese said, hardware and software go hand in hand in there. Well, China and the U.S., let's talk about that, because China-U.S. established diplomatic relations nearly 40 years ago, exactly 40 years ago. Now let's turn to my colleague in Washington to get their perspective on China's reform and opening up, which has changed the world in many ways. Mike?
Zhou Yue, always a pleasure talking to you. China hasn't just been the world's factory for the past 40 years. It's been a driver of diplomacy as well, especially as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. Let's take a closer look at China's role at the UN now with Roy Rottenberg. He's live in our Washington newsroom.
Thanks, Mike. China's presence in the UN dates back to 1945. It was one of the body's founding members that year. In fact, the UN Charter granted China status as a permanent member of the Security Council as one of the so-called P5. But it wasn't until 1971 that the People's Republic of China, the government in Beijing, was actually seated in New York at the P5 table. That position gave Beijing veto power on issues of global importance. It's power China has used less frequently than other members until recently. Since 2011, China has vetoed half a dozen resolutions surrounding the war in Syria, largely because they called for military intervention. That's a position that's inconsistent with Beijing's official policy of non-interference. Now, China most recently assumed the rotating role of president of the Security Council in November. a month-long position that came amid increasing trade tensions with another P5 member, the United States, over trade, the DPRK, and key international agreements. Remember, after the U.S. backed out of the UN climate deal reached in Paris shortly after Donald Trump became president, Beijing doubled down as the developing world's leading voice on combating climate change. And over the last few weeks, China's really emerged as the clear power broker at a UN climate conference in Poland, in part as one of the world's biggest emitters of greenhouse gases, but also because the U.S. stepped back. The global community has really looked to China to fill the gap. Now, before the conference, the top U.S. and EU climate negotiators flew to Beijing to meet with their Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping. Mr. Xi himself admitted that China is changing, that it has transferred from a passive participant on the issue to a proactive one. Mike?
Rowie, as chair of the Security Council last month, China hosted a debate on strengthening multilateralism. Again, that's a cause that seems at odds with the current administration here in Washington.
Indeed, and we're seeing that really play out on the global stage. It was very apparent at the annual meeting of world leaders at the UN General Assembly. We heard from Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi. He stressed the importance of multilateralism as a counterpart to unilateralism. And take something like peacekeeping troops. Of the P5 members, the U.S. is the biggest financial contributor to the peacekeeping budget, but China is the biggest contributor of troops. Some 2,600 are in South Sudan, in Mali, in Darfur, and the DRC. These are some pretty tough missions, and China is training 8,000 more of them. And you're seeing China stepping in to fill other spaces after the U.S. withdrew from UN agencies, its Human Rights Council, its cultural arm, UNESCO. Many are looking to China to fill a vacuum. China is saying global governance is something we need to do together. Mike?
Rowie, thanks so much. China's diplomatic reach also extends to Latin America. China has developed close ties with a number of countries in the region. Joel Richards joining us now from Buenos Aires. Joel, Argentina was one of the stops for President Xi Jinping's recent visit earlier this month.
Mike, good evening from Buenos Aires. Buenos Aires was one of the stops. It was also a stop for 19 of the leaders of the world's top, most important GDPs. G20, of course, was hosted by Argentina just a week or so ago. But the only leader who was afforded an official state visit was Xi Jinping, who on the Sunday after the two-day meeting of the G20 in this city, met with Mauricio Macri. And Argentina and China signed over 30 agreements on a whole host of issues ranging from trade and from investment and cultural ties to also finance. Just today, this afternoon, the currency swap between China and Argentina has been confirmed. $8.7 billion there, very important for Argentina when it comes to shoring up its bank reserves. Of course, everyone knows about the economic troubles here. But after Argentina, Xi Jinping then went on to Panama, a country that only established diplomatic ties with China in 2017. So there you have in that trip for the Chinese president a country with very established ties and a country with much more recently established ties. And so this is something we're seeing across Latin America. China's influence growing. Trade is growing according to the Chinese authorities. It's around $260 billion worth of trade last year between the region and China. And so, Mike, this really is something that has been growing in the last few years and certainly looks set to continue that trend.
Yeah, so just how important is Latin America to China's Belt and Road Initiative?
Well, this region is viewed as a natural extension, if it's not necessarily an official part of the Belt and Road Initiative. In Mexico, we saw the recent President López Obrador, who took over, wanting his country to sign up. At the moment, there are a few bilateral agreements between China and Latin American countries, but as a region, and this is really what many diplomats and government officials will say, is there's not a coordinated approach from Latin America to get involved in these big multi-billion dollar infrastructure projects. And really the issue is that China is perhaps ready, but the region is not yet ready to accept that help.
Joel Richards live for us. Thanks so much. I'm joined now by Haiyan Wang, managing partner of the China-India Institute. 40 years of opening up. And when we think of that, we think of the U.S. and China and trade. But recently, China has been much more aggressive in its approach towards Latin America, trying to establish its relationships. Just talking about Panama, President Xi Jinping just there touring the Panama Canal. It's obviously going to be a key player in the Belt and Road Initiative. Talk to us about how it sees that unfolding, the relationship with Latin America and the Belt and Road Initiative.
I think that China's relationship with other countries, including Latin American countries, is foremost in economic relationships. And I think that it is the China's needs initially for raw materials that lead China to Latin America to invest in Latin America. And then, of course, Latin America has the raw materials to supply to China. And as China grow, more of a dependence on raw materials. And then, Belt and Road initiatives initially were more of a Eurasian initiatives and now extended to Latin America. And I think that we must keep in mind that these are not political initiatives. These are not geopolitical play, but this is more out of the needs for economic cooperation that must be built upon real needs, both on the part of the Latin American countries as well as for China's economic development.
Let's talk a little bit about the relationship with the United States, which we know is fractured right now, but we know that there's been a bit of a détente. We've got this 90-day kind of cooling off period where they can try and find their footing. Where do you see that going?
Well, right now, everybody is trying to turn the crystal ball to try to foretell. It could go either directions. It could be that over the next 90 days, that negotiations will result in a significant warming up of the relationships. That there won't be another increase of a tariff 25% on $200 billion of Chinese exports to the U.S. And there could be significant opening up in terms of more sectors, opening up to foreign investment. Could mean more tariff reduction on China's side. Could mean some significant improvement in some of the intellectual property protection regimes and enforcement within China. So that could be one route. On the other hand, some recent development could mean that both sides hardens up, and that would be bad for the global economy.
China, though, has made some goodwill efforts, lowering the auto tariffs and, of course, buying the soybeans. It seems like perhaps even the President of the United States, who's rather mercurial, and it depends on what tweet you're reading, but it seems as though he seems to think that they're open to a deal. Do you think we're any closer? I mean,
it is very hard to say. I think that it is, on the surface, it's all about closing the trade gap, reducing the trade deficit on the U.S. side. In essence, the competition, the rivalry is beyond trade. It's beyond economic. We're really seeing the competition on the technology front. Who is going to be the dominant technology leader, over decades to come, and who would have more of a geopolitical influence on the global stage. So, I think it is beyond just the will of President Trump. And we see some kind of, bipartisan lining up, toughening up on policies towards China. So even if we might have presidential change down the road, this sort of a strategic rivalry might not be easily eased up.
We just saw the Import-Export Expo in Shanghai in November. Basically, China saying we're open for business. Talk to us about this evolution.
I think that China has developed to the point where China is serving as the big market. And I think the Import-Expo in Shanghai is clearly sending a big signal that we're not only accounting for 10% of the global exports, we're already accounting for 10% of the global imports. And then that door will also going to be opening up wider because of the domestic needs, because of the shift towards more of a consumption-led economy. That said, that is just one aspect of what some of the Western countries are looking for China to bring to the table beyond just more imports. It's really wanted to have more access to China's some of the industry sectors. And I think beyond opening up of financial sectors and and other sectors might open up even more to foreign direct investment, particularly in other service sectors.
It's very interesting to watch, isn't it? Haiyan Wang, thank you so much for coming in. Really appreciate it. Yeah. And of course, we'll be watching President Xi Jinping's speech to see where he wants to lead a rising China next. Zhou Yue and Wang, back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Mike. We will carry live the speech of President Xi at the commemorative meeting. But of course, China's reaches go beyond North America. It is actually a global footprint. And our Nairobi colleagues also sent back their perspectives on China's reform and opening up from an African view.
China continues to be a major pillar of economic support for many African countries. The expectation is that the reforms and opening up policies of China will trigger more prosperity for the continent. In West Africa, trade relations between China and Nigeria have blossomed over the past decade. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmas with more.
Nigeria's Computer Village is the largest ICT accessories market in West Africa. And if there's one place to measure the impact of trade relations between Nigeria and China, it's here. Over 90% of the items sold in this market come from China. Most of the Nigerian businessmen operating here often travel to China to buy the goods sold in the market. Ziggy is one of them and says business relations with his Chinese counterparts have deepened greatly over the years.
The moment both parties are engaged in a honest performance, you know, I give what I promised, and he supplies what he promised. It works well, and it has really increased our productivity here. It has really increased our selling output.
Early this year, Nigeria entered into a $2.5 billion bilateral currency swap deal with the People's Bank of China to facilitate business transactions between Nigerian and Chinese businessmen without having to resort to a third currency like the dollar to do business. Ziggy says the deal is the best thing that has happened to businesses like his, importing heavily from China.
Before now, you go through the hurdles of changing your dollar brought in from Nigeria here, but now it's not the same again, you know. And another easy way of doing it is the value is no longer based on dollar exchange rate. So the yuan has its own value to the naira. It makes it a lot easier. And that's why these days you might not even have many people traveling to China, because that arrangement is a win-win thing. I could be at the comfort of my house or I come from office and make a call to my supplier there. You know, the moment he confirms the money paid here in naira value, you know, at their own exchange, it's done. Once both parties understand themselves and they trust each other, it works well.
The horizon looks bright for relations between Nigerian and Chinese businesses, but there is a concern here over the imbalance in the bilateral trade between both countries, which is obviously skewed in favor of China. I mean, there are more Chinese products coming in here than there are Nigerian products going the other way. But then the last China International Import Expo was designed to address some of those concerns. So it's up to Nigerian businesses to take advantage of the opportunities offered by that event to increase their exports to China. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Let's now get some more perspective from two experts on the issue of China's development and its cooperation with the African continent.
We have a lot of Nigerians who are now doing business in China. We have a lot of Nigerian banks that are doing business in China and now have offices in China. So I think it has been a win-win for both China and Nigeria, and I would imagine for several other countries.
Particularly the technological advances that China brings and the investment of infrastructure certainly have been pleasing to many Africans who've taken advantage. I certainly use your made in China laptops every moment of the day.
For further insights into the impact of China's reform and opening up policy, I'm joined in studio by David Owiro. He is an independent consultant and an African economic and political affairs analyst. David, thank you very much for joining us. What's your view of China's reform and opening up policy and how it is beneficial to the country?
Well, thank you for having me. I think from the outset, China's foray into the international and global leadership has been beneficial for Africa. For one, we know that Africa has great development needs, and China's support, particularly through aid and loans and grants, has gone towards meeting the very core of those needs, which is infrastructure development. We know national economies within Africa are trying to industrialize, and they're trying to modernize the agricultural sector. And so they've gone out to, and China has been instrumental in supporting infrastructure development such as roads and ports and bridges. And so these are critical because if you look at, for a long time, Africa's priorities have not been taken into consideration in the developmental aid that it has gotten. And so now we see an intricate integration between Africa's development priorities through its the AU's Agenda 2063 and Africa's and China's response in supporting that agenda.
And how has this shift in the Chinese policy impacted its ties with the African continent over the last 4 decades?
I think it has improved quite a bit. If you look at, for instance, bilateral trading arrangements between Africa and China, they have increased. And there has been at least a call and aspiration for more trading, deepening of trading relations between African economies and China. We see now a very deliberate push by China to increase not only its exports, but also to balance the trading imbalance that is there between African economies and China. And so now China has taken at least an initiative to increase domestic consumption so that imports into China can increase from the rest of the world. And so this South-to-South cooperation that has been going on, of course, Africa stands to benefit. We know China is a big global player, it has a big economy, and incomes in China have been rising. And with that, China being more integrated into the global economy is an opportunity for Africa because Africa has been cut off, it has been underdeveloped for much of the last 50 years. And so as Africa seeks to integrate and increase its value add within the manufacturing sector, some of the opportunities for jobs, certainly through this cooperation, will come to Africa.
And what can African countries learn from the experience of opening up China, which has contributed to huge development for the country?
I think for a long time, China's export-oriented development strategy has worked, of course, through numerous state support. So we see, much of their private sector is actually state-led. Those, of course, offer very good lessons for Africa. The unfortunate thing is that Africa's experience with state-led economic growth hasn't been that good of an experience. And so these, of course, are good, valuable lessons. I think the thing that stands out for me is that export-oriented development is still part of the development story that Africa can pursue. What remains to be seen is how these new trading arrangements that Africa is participating in can then be implemented and utilized by not only the domestic class of manufacturing that exists, but also for consumers. We know Africa has a big population, a big demand, and incomes are also rising. Africa has witnessed huge GDP growth across the last 1.5 decades. And so there's, of course, opportunities for not only increasing the staple of exports that we have, moving away from, primarily denominated in primary products or commodities, to expand into more sophisticated value-added manufacturing outputs. In as much as we also try to increase our own consumption of sophisticated products. We know a lot of our mobile devices and finished products are actually imports from China. And so there's opportunities at both ends of both sides of the scale that both countries can actually benefit from.
Indeed, the success story of China's reforms and opening up policy has been and will continue to be a source of great inspiration to the African continent. Back to you.
Thank you. With the rising of China, where some in the international community still have concerns about China's rapid development, especially recently. So how can China be more open and allow the markets to have a broader say in decision making?
And of course, creating fair opportunities for foreign investment and further protecting intellectual property are also in focus. Will China make breakthroughs on all these issues? Let's hear from my colleague Tang Bo here in the studio. Hello there, Tang Bo. Could you tell us more about the reform of the IP protection? The issue is something that China and the US have been at odds with.
Well, according to a memorandum of cooperation signed in early December by 38 government authorities, all these authorities will share information and impose multiple punishments on entities engaged in severely dishonest behavior in the field of intellectual property rights, such as declining to execute punishments on patent violations and submitting fake documents when applying for patents. With the multiple punishments taking effect at the end of this month as scheduled, organizations and individuals with records of severe dishonesty regarding intellectual property will face difficulties in getting external financing. Such entities will also face restrictions over a wide range of economic activities, such as participating in government purchasing as suppliers, setting up for or becoming senior manager of financial institutions. Experts say the move is an innovative approach in the protection of intellectual property, as it correlates dishonesty in the field of intellectual property rights with business credit that influences enterprises and individuals' access to all kinds of economic activities. They say, compared with traditional punishments, which had limited influence and were hard to execute completely, the new approach is a more powerful deterrent.
And also, Tambo, what about the business environment here in China? Some foreign businesses worry it is becoming less friendly to them.
Well, according to the World Bank's newly released rankings, China leaped from 78th to 46th place, rising 32 spots, which shows that China had made dramatic improvements to its business environment over the past year. In this report, China was one of the top 10 improvers, and its gains were the third highest out of the 190 economies ranked. The change is even more striking as China had stagnated in the rankings for much of the last decades. In 2008, China ranked 86, improving only marginally to 78 in both 2016 and 2017. In between, in 2012, China was ranked as low as 99. The strong performance this time is a result of a concerted campaign by China's central government to streamline administration, enhance compliance oversight, and provide better services. For example, as China lifted restrictions on foreign ownership of auto joint ventures, BMW announced in October it would pay 3.6 billion euro, approximately $4 billion to raise its stake in BMW Brilliance Automotive from 50% to 75%, becoming the first foreign auto company to take a majority stake in its China joint ventures. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang said at the meeting in late November that to foster a more enabling business environment, the primary task is to widen market access, and secondly, to properly exercise supervision and oversight.
Well, better oversight and also wider market access. Thank you very much, Tang Bo, for your explanations. And I'm watching a special coverage of China's reform and opening up over the past 40 years. We'll take a short break and be back in a minute.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
So you're now watching a special coverage of China's reform and opening up. In a short while, we'll have a live coverage of the commemorative meeting in the Great Hall of the People. Let's continue our topics of reform and opening up. The problem is, can China continue the dynamics of its past 40 years? For example, people worry, is this still a level playing field for all businesses here in China? Will China open its market even wider to the rest of the world? Can China successfully reform its state-owned sectors? Do you think China has already got up recipes for all those problems? Or is it the problem of implementation?
I would say it's mainly about the implementations, because 40 years ago it was relatively easy.
Easier?
Much easier, because 40 years ago any changes will improve likelihood of almost everyone. But today you do have vested interest, so that's not so straightforward. And secondly, as Bert said, 40 years ago per capita GDP was $200-300, so the base was low. Today almost $10,000. External environment 40 years ago was more favorable, and today we are facing more headwinds. So there will be challenges, actually a lot more challenges, but I still think the key is about implementation. I think we know what should be done. As Bert said, financial sector should be informed, and foreign participation should be increased, and state-owned sector has to be restructured, and the social safety net has to be built. I think we all know things.
So Bert, you think all those resistance coming from both within and without are increasingly difficult?
Well, they're not easy to manage, but I mean the external side is a logical consequence of China's rise. China is no longer a small economy. When I started working on China, it was as big as the Netherlands, believe it or not. Now it's the second largest economy in the world. So China has a much larger influence on the rest of the world, and it needs to take account of that. So its own domestic policies have far more spillovers, positive, but sometimes also to the concerns of other countries. And managing that, frankly, China can take a leadership role. Domestically, yes, it's in a way it's become more difficult because there are interest groups and there is a middle class that also wants this right. But at the same time, China has a tremendous amount of reform experience accumulated and very successful reform experience. So in other words, I think China can be confident that if it puts its mind to it, it can go through these difficult reforms. And the plan is there. The third plenum of the 18th Party Congress has laid out a very good plan, and many of the elements would satisfy the domestic reform requirements and would actually also play very positively in the international sphere.
As Sithao just mentioned, the problem is implementation. Because of their vested interests, there is established groups that are in opposition to reform because it touches their interests. How can the central leadership and the different departments coordinate to move ahead?
Well, keeping the eye on the ball is in the end the prescription. If you look at the long-term trajectory of China's welfare development, from 9,000 to something like 40,000 by mid-century, that's what the aim is. That requires the most efficient use of resources, the most efficient use of capital, the most efficient use of China's people, investing in people, and that's really the reform program. So therefore, setting a higher bar for the performance of state enterprises is good for China's people, and it will pay for pensions, it will pay for schooling, it will pay for healthcare if there is more returns from those state enterprises. And so that's the real eye on the ball. China's government has made commitment to its people. Meeting them requires high performance of everybody.
And now the big question is, why, after 40 years of reform and opening up, does China still need to continue this process?
Yes, of course, because I mean, think about this. Even after 40 years, China still a massive work in progress. There are still many areas need improvement, and we have to understand, as Bert said, per capita GDP of OECD countries is at least 3 times of ours. So we still have a lot of things to do.
Now, what will be the prime areas that the going forward reform and opening up will be targeting on? Bert?
Well, aside from the economic reforms, you mentioned them, the balance between state enterprise and private enterprise, the financial sector, I believe very important reforms are in the social sectors. First and foremost, investing in people. So in the education system, it's doing well, but can do even better, and especially the disparities between the advanced parts. Shanghai is the top performer globally, but rural Guizhou less so. So getting more equality in the performance there is very important. Second, the health system, very important for people, more so now that China is aging. It can be a huge cost factor, which should be avoided. And it doesn't provide enough services yet for ordinary Chinese. Reforming that has been, around the world, one of the most difficult areas of reforms. But if China manages it, it will be a huge competitive advantage. And third, pension system. Again, China is aging. Pensions are probably not yet adequate, underfunded, and not fully capitalized. So there's a big burden on the future generations if that reform doesn't happen. So it's an important reform.
But I have a question. All those 3 areas, social programs, need money. That means China needs to spend on its budget, which is already very tight because of the slow economy. Can China manage to have both?
So yes, it can. First, China spent a tremendous amount on building up its infrastructure. Now China has world-class infrastructure. By any estimate that we have, it's already at OECD levels. So going forward, it needs to invest less. And you can therefore save and invest it in the social sector. Second, if you get more performance out of your economy, especially out of the state-owned enterprises, and get more of it to the budget, you can afford it. And third, there's now many more rich people in China. Maybe it's time that they, as Deng Xiaoping said, help others get rich too. In other words, pay a bit more taxes so that some of that can become affordable.
So invest in people to get more productivity out of people, rather than land and capital as we did in the past 40 years. And now you are watching a live feed from the Great Hall of the People, the venue for the commemoration ceremony. The General Secretary of the CPC, Xi Jinping, and other government officials are now entering the hall. The ceremony will start anytime soon.
And we're going to give you a little background information about this ceremony. Approximately 3,000 people will attend today's event. Among them are representatives from the CPC, the central government, the military, and of course people from all walks of life, members of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, and the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, members of democratic parties, members of the People's Liberation Army and Armed Police Force, veteran party members, and retired government officials. And of course, people from the business community, foreign ambassadors.
同志们，朋友们
Friends,
各位来宾
ladies and gentlemen,
庆祝改革开放
the conference commemorating the 40th anniversary of reform and opening up now begins. Please all rise. For the national anthem of the People's Republic of China. Please be seated. Today, the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China and the State Council are convening this conference to commemorate the 40th anniversary of China's reform and opening up, review this remarkable journey over the past 4 decades and its valuable experience, and honor those who have made outstanding contribution to reform and opening up. We're joined here today by Comrade Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, President of China, and Chairman of the Central Military Commission. Also, other members of the Standing Committee of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee, Comrade Li Zhanshu, Comrade Wang Yang, Comrade Wang Huning, Comrade Zhao Leji, and Comrade Han Zheng, Comrade Wang Qishan, Vice President of China. And other party and state leaders in Beijing, members of the military leadership, heads of different departments and Beijing, members of other political parties and All China Federation of Industry, prominent personages without party affiliation, veteran party members and retired officials, individuals to be honored today, and their relatives, compatriots from Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, overseas Chinese and returned overseas Chinese and their relatives, representatives of Beijing citizens, Army and the Armed Police Force, diplomatic missions in China, and representative organizations in China, and foreign and now, Comrade Wang Huning, member of the committee of the member of the Secretariat of the CPC Central Committee, with the decision of the CPC Central Committee and the State Council to honor individuals with outstanding contribution to China's reform and opening up program. Decision of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China and the State Council to honor individuals with outstanding contribution to China's reform and opening up program, 18 December 2018. This year marks the 40th anniversary of the start of China's reform and opening up endeavors. In December 1978, at the third plenary session of this 11th Central Committee, the Communist Party of China made a historic decision to shift the focus of our party and the country to economic development and start a process of reform and opening up, and called on the entire party and China of all ethnic groups to embark on a new long march toward socialist modernization. It was a major turning point in the history of our party and the country after the founding of the People's Republic of China, and it was a monumental decision that charted the course for China today. In the past 40 years, our party has rallied the Chinese people around itself and led them in forging ahead with tenacity and resolve. We have overcome outdated mindset and removed institutional obstacles that held back the development of our country and the nation, thus blazing a path of distinctive Chinese features. We have unleashed the vitality of China and pulled with strength, and we have achieved a great transition from catching up with the trend of the times to steering it, writing an epic in the development of China and the Chinese nation. These efforts have brought changes never seen before to our party, our country, our people, our armed forces, and our nation. China's great endeavor of reform and opening up has also exerted a profound impact on the world, presenting other countries huge opportunities. The 18th Party Congress Central Committee, with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, with immense courage and a keen sense of responsibility, carried out sweeping reforms further to the world. Historians have been of the party and the country, which has gone through transformation as a result. This has ushered socialism with Chinese characteristics into a new era and opened a new historical chapter of reform and opening up. With renewed vigor, we, the Chinese nation, are tall and firm in the East. Our people have created great achievements of reform and opening up, and our people are the source of strength for advancing reform and opening up. Indeed, it is the efforts and ingenuity of our Chinese people in their hundreds of millions that have made it possible to make breakthroughs in terms of both understanding and practices of reform and opening up. It is thanks to these efforts that new things have emerged and new practices developed in the course of reform and opening up. In the great cause of reform and opening up in the past 40 years, a large number of pioneers who have ridden the tide of the times, who are committed to reform and innovation, and who have boldly explored the path forward, have emerged. On the occasion of the 40th anniversary of reform and opening up, to honor outstanding individuals, boost public morale, carry forward the pioneering spirit of bold reform, and galvanize the entire party and the Chinese people of all ethnic groups to unswervingly follow the party and carry through reform and opening up to the end, the Party Central Committee and the State Council have decided to confer on Yu Ming and other comrades, 100 in all, the title of Reform Pioneers and award medals of Reform Pioneers to them. In appreciation of the support and assistance given by the international community to China's reform and opening up endeavors, the Friendship Medal for contribution to China's reform will be awarded to Alain Maheu and other 9 foreign friends. The reform pioneers honored today have made great contribution to advancing reform and opening up. They are pace-setters in pursuing this great initiative, and they are outstanding representatives of our people. They support the leadership of the party, China's socialist system, reform and opening up, and they have forged ahead in the right direction of reform. They have broken free the constraints of outdated thinking, overcome the resistance of interest, tackled and navigated treacherous rapids, fought on the front line of reform opening up, and taken the lead in changing things, systems, and institutions, thus promoting reform and opening up and the socialist drive. They have taken acting on core socialist values. They have strongly promoted the national spirit at its core, our time's future reform and innovation. Their dedication, selfless contribution, and integrity are greatly admired by our people. Here today are all Chinese, long committed in China's exchanges and cooperation with other countries, and deeply in China's reform and opening up endeavors. They have made outstanding contribution to supporting China's great cause of reform and opening up. Socialism with Chinese characteristics has entered a new era, and we have embarked on the new toward the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. The era calls for a great spirit and a lofty cause pioneers to advance it. The Party Central Committee and the State Council call upon the entire party and the Chinese people of all nations. Xi Jinping thought on with Chinese characteristics and follow the example of the outstanding individual. We should strengthen the four consciousnesses, have full confidence in the path theory system and culture of socialism with Chinese characteristics, and follow the two modes. We should remember the commitment we made when we launched the Reform and Opening Up initiative, continue to pursue it, and remain firm in our confidence and resolve to press ahead with reform and opening up. Let us rally more closely around the Party Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, and create a powerful force to further advance reform and opening up from a new start in new era. Let us strive to secure a decisive victory in building a moderately prosperous society and a great victory in building socialism with Chinese characteristics in the new era. Let us endeavor to realize the Chinese dream, a dream of national renewal, and satisfy people's wish for a better life. Let us work together to safeguard world peace, promote common development, and build a community with a shared future for mankind.
The
following is the list of reform pioneers, the recipients of the Friendship Medal for contribution to China's reform. Leading contributor to the reform and development of defense technologies. Teacher of excellence in primary education reform. Farmers who piloted the household contract responsibility system in Gang village, pioneers of rural reform. Ma Monkey, leading entrepreneur and social advocate from Macau, who took the lead in investing in the mainland. Ma Yun, innovator of digital economy. Ma Huateng, pathfinder in Internet Plus. Ma Shanxiang, people's mediator who contributed to education and community-level governance. Wang Daheng, main initiator of 863 program. Wang Shumao, exemplar of safeguarding China's rights in the South China Sea. Wang Yongming, inventor of Wang Ma Wubi, an input method that facilitated the digitization of Chinese characteristics. Wang Youde, trailblazer in desertification control. Wang Boxiang, pioneer of agricultural industrialization by creating the Shouguang vegetable brand. Wang Qiming, new Iron Man of Daqing, who promoted sustainable oil production through scientific techniques. Wang Xuan, pioneer of the reform of the management system for science and technology. Wang Quancheng, outstanding member of the Hong Kong business community who supported China's development, reform, and opening up. Wang Jiafu, pioneer of new theories in promoting law-based governance. Wang Ying, outstanding member of discipline inspection and supervision staff who contributed to the full and strict governance of Wei Changjing, war hero in safeguarding the peaceful environment for reform and opening up. Wei Huanneng, a pioneer of public self-governance. Zhu Xiaoling, a model employee of knowledge-based enterprises. Yuan Sen, a model a champion of economic reforms. Ye Cong, a pioneer for China's submersibles. Shen Jilan, MC from rural China. Xu Jiuyong, defender of China's interests in international. Zhan Shaozhi, an architect settlement programs and project. An innovator in port. Nima Zhu, a reform pioneering area. Community-level official dedicated to poverty alleviation. Han Zhang, the designer of the model for reform. Liu Yonghao, a leading private entrepreneur. Xu Lirong, a champion of institutional shipping. Xu Zhenchao, a fine example of Barrett. 徐海峰, China's first Olympic. 崇德 to the legal system for socialism with Chinese characteristics. 孙永才 R&D leader of the Fuxing high-speed train project.
航天科技事业
An instrumental contributor to innovation in China's aerospace program.
农村改革的重要推动者
A champion of reform.
民营汽车工业
李书
开
福,
放
a
发展
private
的优
business
秀
leader
代表
of China's growing auto
李书
industry.
福电子产业
Dong Sheng,
国际
a
市场的
trailblazer
突
for
破者
China's electronics
李
industry
东
going
升
global.
讴歌改革开放的歌唱家
李谷一
李谷一
artist who sings in tribute to reform and opening up.
开创山区扶贫
李
新路的
保国,
太
a
行山
committed
路
pioneer aviation in the Taihang Mountains.
海
Yan
推
Hong,
动科技创新
exceptional
的优秀
entrepreneur
代
who
表
has returned from
李彦
overseas,
宏
contributing to China's technological innovation.
红政
学界
核心价值
an
观的
outstanding
艺
who has
术
played
家
a role in core socialist values.
初心
Proud of dedicated his being of the people.
城市集体企业的
金生
先行
a
者
pioneer in the reform of
步
urban
新
collective
生
enterprise.
华西村改革
吴仁宝
发展的
leader
带
of the
头人
reform and the development of
吴
Huaxi
仁宝
village.
人居环境科
吴
学的
良庸
创建
founder of the
者
science of
吴
human
良
settlements.
庸乡镇基层党员干部的优秀代表
吴金印 a model
吴金
party
印
member working in rural communities.
厦门航空事业的开
吴荣南
拓者
a business pioneer for
吴
Xiamen
荣南
Airlines.
基层社会治理
邱俄
创新
国
的优
a
秀民
police
警代
officer who
表
excels in the
邱俄
innovation of
国
community level social governance.
乡镇企业改组
何
上市的
享健
先行者
forerunner in the
何享
reorganization
健
and listing of township and village enterprises.
落实政策
何载
平反
model of
冤假
implementing the
错案的
party's
行
charter
者
policy and redress mishandled cases.
深度贫困地区带领脱贫于刘芬
于刘芬 outstanding representative in the campaign of poverty.
司法体制改革的燃灯者
Pathfinder in the reform system.
读团结进步的建
Niaz
库尔班尼亚
advocate for
兹
ethnic unity and the
对外开放法
张月
治
娇
建设的
active
积极
contributor
实
to
践
opening
者
up through the building of
张月
China's
娇
legal system.
共企管理创新的优秀企业家
张瑞敏
张瑞敏
entrepreneur
劳动者的
张黎
优秀代
明with
表
salvation.
我是社会公平正义检察
Model
官
procurator who justice.
方式
新
的造
the ping cooperation between China and foreign countries
一带一路
under the Belt and Road Initiative.
激青年典范
Mathematician and inspiration for the youth to make breakthroughs. Yonghong for community party building and governance.
体制改革理论的可惜三
向准 ecological protection 可可西里 and
命践行航空报国就代表
China's aviation
罗
industry.
阳。农村基层党建
An innovator in using 来西
导市场政局马克思中国研究的
theory text.
塑造
Spirit of the Chinese women.
改革开放中用的优秀
workers in reform.
真理标大
污名 the debate cheering for truth.
中国舔的要发
5-meter aperture.
温州民营经
Entrepreneur in Wenzhou's private economic sector.
化
柳传
先行
志 a
者
pioneer in the knowledge to business.
公
agencies.
资本市场发展的不写改革开放音乐体育领优秀代表张家改革开放试验田杂
袁隆平 pioneer
平
on hybrid ride. 李润峰 a leading entrepreneur in converting
雷着
embodiment of 李润峰 theory.
科技创
主要有
新
traditional Chinese
国家代
子龙
表
a prominent
空军化创
standing
蒋
innovator
家
of Air Force.
人
Astronaut who has made 3 space travels.
事
Asia a pioneer in China's nuclear weapons development. 万球 form.
倾力支持国家改革
Entrepreneur dedicated to China's reform and opening up.
放
谢晋
拨乱反
a
正
film
的电
artist
影艺
whose
术
works
家
help and right historical wrong.
义乌小商品市场的催
谢高华 founder of the 义乌 International.
鼓舞亿万农村
Outside
开
works
放的
help
优
draw
秀作
countless
家
young people in rural China to form and open up.
绿水青山就是金山
鲍新民
银山理念
another
的
follower
践
of the
行者
vision, green is
鲍
gold.
新民教
Pioneer for
环
relics
境师
preservation.
子信息研究的创新者
In Hong
做出杰出
Hong
贡
Kong
献的
entrepreneur
香
and
港
contributions to form and
霍
opening.
东 建设的
戴明
实践
蒙,
探
a
索者
pioneer of aircraft carriers.
我医疗卫生事业发展作者
Contribute development and
我和抗的第一位
for factory management reform and
交流合作的
and
克劳
cooperation
斯施
with the
瓦
international community.
改革开放
and opening up. Masayoshi Ohira, statesman of Japan relations and supported China's reform
推动新加坡开放 我
of China's participation in
胡
the
安
global
传
Steve
承
trade
交流
and
的促
people
进推动中贸
work entrepreneur and China other countries French
与让世界
Robert
讲
Cohn,
述
a friend
当
of
代
China,
中国宣读
请中央号获者
the awards
中国改革有奖章
and the from the central flowers. Let us all rise. To all the
Secretary Trade Commission will remarks. Day will be well of the communist history of the People's Republic of China and valuable experience to rally all party members and all Chinese people to advance reform and opening up in the new era, and to work tirelessly to realize the 2 centenary goals and the Chinese dream of national rejuvenation. Comrades and friends, the third plenary session was convened at an important historic juncture when the party and our country were at a crossroads. It was a time when the world economy was developing rapidly, and science and technology were making progress every day. China, however, ravaged by the decade-long Cultural Revolution, was on the brink of economic collapse and struggling to meet people's basic needs. There was an urgent need for reconstruction. People in and outside the party strongly demanded that the mistakes of the Cultural Revolution be corrected, so that our party and nation could emerge from a difficult period. Comrade Deng Xiaoping pointed out, if we don't make reforms now, our modernization program and socialist cause will be doomed. Led by Comrade Deng and supported by veteran revolutionaries, the third plenary session broke free from the long-existing shackles of leftist mistakes and repudiated the fallacy of the 2 whatevers. The session fully recognized that the scientific system of Mao Zedong thought must be correctly understood in its full context. The session spoke highly of the debate on the criterion for truth, thoroughly repudiated the slogan that class struggle is the key link, and re-established the Marxist ideological, political, and organizational line. This signified the beginning of reform and opening up in China. Our party made the historic decision of going for reform and opening up based on a profound grasp of the future of the party and of the country, on an in-depth review of the experience gained in socialist revolution and development, on keen insights into the trend of the times, and on a thorough understanding of people's aspirations and needs. Comrade Deng pointed out, poverty is not socialism, and we must keep abreast of the times. That is the very purpose of our reform. History runs on its own laws, yet people are not destined to be passive. With a clear understanding of the general trajectory of history, people would be able to seize historical opportunities for change and make pioneering efforts for greater progress of mankind. Reform and opening up is a great reawakening of our party, one that nurtured great creativity in both theory and practice for our party. Reform and opening up is a great revolution in the history of the Chinese people and the Chinese nation, one that propelled a quantum leap in the course of socialism with Chinese characteristics. Comrades and friends, the founding of the Communist Party of China, the founding of the People's Republic of China, and the pursuit of reform and opening up policy and socialism with Chinese characteristics. These historic events, taking place after the May 4th movement, represent the three milestones in achieving China's great national rejuvenation in modern times. With Comrade Mao Zedong as their chief representative, Chinese communists developed Mao Zedong thought by combining the basic tenets of Marxism, Leninism with the actual practice of the Chinese Revolution. They united and led the whole party and people of all ethnic groups in China in long and hard struggles, completed the new democratic revolution, built the People's Republic of China, and established the socialist system as China's basic system. Chinese communists thus accomplished the most profound and the greatest social transformation in China's history and created the fundamental political conditions and institutional foundation for all development and progress in China today. In this process, despite the serious setbacks it went through, the party developed distinctively creative theories and made tremendous success in socialist revolution and development, thus providing invaluable experience as well as a theoretical and material basis for launching the great initiative of building socialism with Chinese characteristics in the new historical period. After the third plenary session of the 11th CPC Central Committee, Chinese communists, with Comrade Deng Xiaoping as their chief representative, united and led the whole party and people of all ethnic groups in China in conducting a thorough review of China's experience in building socialism, both positive and negative. On that basis, and drawing on the experience of world socialism, they established Deng Xiaoping theory and made the historical decision to shift the focus of the party and the country to economic development and to pursue the policy of reform and opening up. They gained a keen appreciation of the underlying goal of socialism and established the party's basic line for the primary stage of socialism. They called for taking one's own road and building socialism with Chinese characteristics, provided scientific answers to basic questions in this regard, and formulated a three-step development strategy aiming to basically realize socialist modernization by the middle of the 21st century. On this basis, the great initiative of building socialism with Chinese characteristics was successfully launched. After the fourth plenary session of the 13th CPC Central Committee, Chinese Communists, with Comrade Jiang Zeming as their chief representative, united and led the whole party and the people of all ethnic groups in China in adhering to the party's basic theory and line, deepened their understanding of what socialism is and how to build it, and what kind of party to build and how to build it. They gathered valuable new experience in governing the party and the country and formed the theory of three represents, standing the severe tests posed by complex domestic and international developments and major setbacks in world socialism. They upheld socialism with Chinese characteristics, set the goal of socialist market reform, and developed a basic framework for achieving this goal. They reaffirmed the basic economic system and the system of income and distribution in the primary stage of socialism, ushered in a new phase in carrying out all-round reform and opening up, and pressed ahead with the great new undertaking of party building, thus advancing socialism with Chinese characteristics into the 21st century. After the party's 16th National Congress, Chinese Communists, with Comrade Hu Jintao as their chief representative, united and led the whole party and people of all ethnic groups in China in continuing to take Deng Xiaoping theory and the theory of three represents as their guidance. On the basis of the new demands of development, they forged a deep understanding of and answered major questions, including what kind of development to pursue and how to pursue it in the new situation, thus forming the scientific outlook on development. They seized the important period of strategic opportunity and advanced practical, theoretical, and institutional explorations in the process of building a moderately prosperous society in all respects. By putting people first and calling for comprehensive, balanced, and sustainable development, Chinese Communists made the overall plan for building socialism with Chinese characteristics centered around ensuring and improving people's well-being, promoting social fairness and justice, building a harmonious world, and strengthening the party's governance capacity and advanced nature, thus successfully upholding and developing socialism with Chinese characteristics from a new historical starting point. Since the 18th Party Congress, the CPC Central Committee has united and led the whole party and people of all ethnic groups in China in comprehensively assessing new developments at home and abroad. Through reviewing past experiences and looking into the future, we addressed the major question of our times. what kind of socialism with Chinese characteristics the new era requires us to uphold and develop, and how we should uphold and develop it. We have thus established the thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. We have implemented the five-sphere integrated plan and the four-pronged comprehensive strategy, upheld the underlying principle of pursuing progress while ensuring stability, and put forth new ideas, new thinking, and new strategies for the work of the party and the country on various fronts, bring about historic changes and historic achievements in the course of the party and the country, and ushering in a new era of socialism with Chinese characteristics. With tremendous political courage and vision, we have reaffirmed that the overall goal of comprehensively deepening reform is to improve and develop the system of socialism with Chinese characteristics and modernize China's system and capacity for governance. We have pursued reform in a more systematic, holistic, and coordinated way, and focused our efforts on major institutional innovation with a view to increasing the sense of fulfillment, happiness, and security of our people. We have introduced more than 1,600 reform initiatives, cracked many hard nuts, and navigated through dangerous currents. Reform is going deeper across the board in a swift but steady manner, with breakthroughs on multiple fronts. Greatness is achieved through hardships and difficulties. In the past 40 years, we have worked to free people's minds and seek truth from facts, and broken new ground through bold trials and reforms. From introducing the household-based contract system, boosting the growth of rural enterprises, and abolishing agricultural tax, animal husbandry tax, and agricultural special product tax, to separating the ownership rights, contract rights, and management rights for contracted rural land, winning the battle against poverty, and implementing the rural vitalization strategy. From setting up special economic zones in Shenzhen and other cities, and opening up key cities in the coastal, border, and inland areas, and along the Yangtze River and major transport routes, to joining the WTO, promoting international cooperation on the Belt and Road, establishing pilot free trade zones, planning for a free trade port with Chinese features, and successfully hosting the first China International Import-Expo. From bringing in to going global. From bolstering SOEs of all sizes and growing the private sector, to deepening reforms of state-owned capital and SOEs, and developing mixed ownership economic entities. From upholding single public ownership to allowing economic entities of various ownerships to develop side by side, with public ownership in the dominant position, and unswervingly consolidating and developing the public sector, and unswervingly encouraging, supporting, and guiding the development of the non-public sector. From the traditional system of planned economy to the innovative system of socialist market economy, and to the reform that enabled the market to play a decisive role in resource allocation, and the government to better play its role. And from focusing reform on the economic system to comprehensively deepening reform of the economic, political, cultural, social, and ecological systems and the system of party building, we have made steady progress in advancing a series of major reform initiatives, including the institutional reform of the party and the government, reforms of the administrative system, the system for law-based governance, the judicial system, the foreign affairs system, the social governance system, the ecological inspection system, and the national security system, and the reforms of national defense and armed forces. Of the institutional framework for party leadership and building, and of the discipline inspection and supervision system. We have continued to implement measures that deliver greater convenience and benefits to our people. Reform and opening up have thus become the defining feature and the most remarkable undertaking of contemporary China.
Comrades and friends, 4 decades ago, reform and opening up ushered in a new phase, progressed to a new century, and put China on a new starting point. Today, 4 decades on, China has entered a new era. Through 4 decades of united, arduous, and persistent struggles, the Communist Party of China has led the Chinese people on a soul-stirring historical journey and achieved epic accomplishments that moved heaven and earth. In the past 40 years, we have been committed to freeing our minds, seeking truth from facts, moving with the times, and applying a realistic and pragmatic approach. We have unswervingly followed the guidance of Marxism and the basic principles of scientific socialism, advanced innovation in theory, practice, system, culture, and other fields with courage, constantly enriched socialism with Chinese characteristics in both practice and theory, and enhanced its distinctive national features in keeping with the times. We have developed the path, theory, system, and the culture of socialism with Chinese characteristics, and improved the vitality of scientific socialism with irrefutable facts. The great banner of socialism continues to fly high over the land of China. In the past 40 years, we have been committed to fulfilling the central task of economic development and unleashing and developing productive forces. China's GDP grew from 367.9 billion yuan to 82.7 trillion yuan in 2017, up by 9.5% on an average annual basis, far above the global average of around 2.9%. Since the inception of reform and opening up, China's share of global GDP rose from 1.8% to 15.2%, generating more than 30% of global growth for years. China's foreign trade of goods soared from $20.6 billion to over $4 trillion. We have attracted over $2 trillion of foreign direct investment. and invested $1.9 trillion overseas. We have also become a top producer of main agricultural products. We have put in place the most complete modern industrial system, achieved many innovation breakthroughs in science and technology, and completed a number of key projects. We have come a long way in infrastructure development, information, road, railway, and aviation networks cover much of the country. Major dam projects, the West-East Pipeline project, and the South-North Water Transfer project bring power, natural gas, and water to all parts of the country. China's high-speed rail, ocean liners, and planes connect different parts of the country like never before. China is now the world's second-largest economy, the biggest manufacturer, top trader of goods, and the second-largest consumer of goods, and second-largest recipient of foreign direct investment. For many years in a row, China has been the holder of the largest foreign exchange reserves. The Chinese people have made decisive strides toward greater prosperity and national strength. In the past 40 years, we have been committed to pursuing the path of socialist political advancement with Chinese characteristics, deepening reform of the political system, and developing socialist democracy. The institutions by which the party and the state exercise leadership have been improved. Substantial progress has been made in pursuing law-based governance in all fields. The Chinese socialist system of laws has been strengthened, providing stronger institutional and legal guarantee for the people to run the country. In the field of human rights, progress has been achieved across the board. A stronger patriotic united front has been formed. People enjoy and exercise a wider range of democratic rights as prescribed by law through more readily available channels and in more diverse forms. The Chinese people, with future in their own hands, are demonstrating enthusiasm, initiative, and creativity unseen before. They are an overwhelming force, forging ahead on the path of reform, opening up, and socialist modernization. In the past 40 years, we have been committed to developing an advanced socialist culture and raising socialist cultural ethical standards. Efforts have been made to cultivate and observe core socialist values and carry forward the fine traditional Chinese culture. We endeavor to guide people with scientific theories, unite them with the right tone in public communication, nurture faith with an advanced culture, and draw inspiration from fine works. Patriotism, collectivism, and socialism are very much alive in people's hearts. Many role models and heroes have emerged. Culture and arts are booming, and the development of internet and information technologies is gathering pace. The ideals, convictions, and cultural confidence of the Chinese nation have been strengthened, and the soft power and influence of the Chinese culture have been enhanced significantly. The great spirit of reform and opening up, which is born out of our 40-year-long endeavors, has significantly enriched our national character and become the most prominent hallmark of the Chinese people in the modern day. In the past 40 years, we have been committed to ensuring and improving people's living standards through development. With all-round progress in ensuring people's access to childcare, education, employment, medical services, elderly care, housing, and social assistance, people's lives and well-being have continued to improve. Per capita disposable income increased from 171 yuan to 26,000 yuan nationwide. The middle income group continues to expand. A total of 740 million Chinese people were lifted out of poverty, bringing the poverty headcount ratio down by 94.4 percentage points, which is a miracle in mankind's fight against poverty. Education has seen all-round development, with the percentage of students completing 9-year compulsory education reaching 93.8%. China has put in place the largest social safety net in the world, covering elderly care, health care, subsistence allowances, and housing. Basic old age pension schemes cover more than 900 million people, and health insurance plans cover more than 1.3 billion people. Permanent urban residents now account for 58.52% of the total population, up by 40.6 percentage points. Life expectancy has been extended from 67.8 years in 1981 to 76.7 years in 2017. The stability China has enjoyed over these decades make it one of the safest countries in the world. Coupons of food, cloth, meat, fish, cooking oil, tofu, groceries, and industrial goods were once part of people's daily life. Now they are only seen in museums. Hunger, shortage, and poverty that plagued the Chinese people for thousands of years have been generally left behind. In the past 40 years, we have stayed committed to environmental protection, resources conservation, and the building of an ecological civilization. We have accelerated our efforts to develop a system for building an ecological civilization, steadily improved the system of functional zoning, made big headway in energy conservation and emission reduction, achieved smooth progress in major ecological conservation and restoration projects, significantly strengthened ecological and environmental governance, and actively participated in and played a leading role in international cooperation to respond to climate change. All these efforts have made our homeland a more beautiful and a better place to live. In the past 40 years, we have upheld the absolute party leadership over the armed forces and steadily advanced the modernization of national defense and the military. We have seen a revolutionary restructuring of the people's armed forces, historic breakthroughs in weapons and equipment, a fundamental transformation in the way our military is run, and a strengthened awareness of its revolutionary tasks and modernization and standardization programs. The People's Armed Forces have acquired significantly greater ability to protect our sovereignty, security, and development interests, and have become an invincible force, defending the happy lives of our people, the motherland, and the world peace. In the past 40 years, we have stayed committed to the great cause of peaceful reunification of the motherland. We have implemented the basic principle of one country, two systems, and resumed the exercise of sovereignty over Hong Kong and Macau, wiping out the century-long humiliation we had suffered. We have upheld the One China principle and the 1992 consensus, strengthened cross-strait economic and cultural exchanges and cooperation, and promoted the peaceful development of cross-strait relations. We have resolutely opposed and deterred separatist elements advocating Taiwan independence, keeping a firm hold on the initiative in developing cross-strait relations. All the sons and daughters of the Chinese nation, and at home and abroad, have developed a stronger sense of identification with the Chinese nation and the Chinese culture, and a firmer resolve to pursue the Chinese dream together. In the past 40 years, we have stayed committed to an independent foreign policy of peace, the path of peaceful development, and a win-win strategy of opening up. We have firmly upheld the basic norms governing international relations and fairness and justice in world affairs. We have made a historic transition from a closed and semi-closed country to one that embraces all-round opening up. We have taken an active part in economic globalization and made our contribution to the common development of mankind. We have actively promoted the building of a noble world economy and a community with a shared future for mankind. We have pushed for the reform of the global governance system. We have unequivocally opposed hegemony and power politics and contributed Chinese wisdom, Chinese approach, and Chinese strength to world peace and development. China has moved closer to center stage as a widely recognized promoter of world peace, contributor to global development, and defender of international order. In the past 40 years, we have made continued efforts to strengthen and improve party leadership. Active measures have been taken to address the risks and tests in reform and opening up, confronting our party while exercising long-term governance. Steady progress has been made in the great new project of party building to maintain the advanced nature and the purity of the party and its close bond with the people. Vigorous efforts have been made to explore the laws that underlie the governance of a Communist Party, the development of socialism, and the evolution of human society, so as to continue to reach new realm in adapting Marxism to the Chinese context. We have ensured that the party exercises effective self-supervision and practices strict self-governance. We have improved the party's political ecosystem, worked ceaselessly to improve party conduct and enforce party discipline, and taken tough action against the practice of formalities for formalities' sake, bureaucratism, hedonism, and extravagance. No tolerance has been shown in the crackdown on corruption. The anti-corruption campaign has delivered a crushing victory. The revolutionary tempering has made our party the backbone of the Chinese people and the Chinese nation, always at the forefront of the times. The progress made in 40 years of reform and opening up has profoundly changed China, the Chinese nation, the Chinese people, and the Communist Party of China. The Chinese nation has achieved a tremendous transformation from standing up, growing rich, to becoming strong. Socialism with Chinese characteristics has achieved a tremendous transformation from establishment, development, to improvement. The Chinese people have achieved a tremendous transformation from days of scarcity to a life of moderate prosperity. The Chinese nation, with an entirely new posture, now stands tall and firm in the East. What we have achieved in the past 40 years is not a godsend, still less a gift from others. It comes from the hard work, wisdom, and the courage of all members of the party and the people of all ethnic groups in China. In just a few decades, we have completed an industrialization process that took developed countries several hundred years. The Chinese people have achieved what was once impossible. We are immensely proud of our fellow countrymen and women who have worked an unprecedented miracle. On behalf of the CPC Central Committee, I hereby pay high tribute to all workers, farmers, intellectuals, public servants, officers, and the men and women of the People's Liberation Army and the Armed Police Force, and the public security police officers who have contributed talent and efforts in their own fields to reform and opening up and to the modernization of our socialist country. My high tribute also goes to all other political parties, public figures without party affiliation, people's organizations, and patriots from all sectors of society. I would also like to extend my sincere greetings to our fellow countrymen and women in the Hong Kong and Macau special administrative regions and in Taiwan, and to overseas Chinese who have worked relentlessly to promote China's reform and opening up and the advancement for China's modernization. I would also like to take this opportunity to express my sincere thanks to all the friends and people from other countries who have shown understanding of and support for China's reform and opening up and modernization.
Comrades and friends, the past 40 years eloquently prove that the path, theory, system, and the culture of socialism with Chinese characteristics pioneered in the wake of the third plenary session of the 11th CPC Central Committee by the Chinese people of all ethnic groups rallying under the leadership of the CPC are completely correct. And the CPC basic theory, line, and policy that have since taken shape are completely correct. The past 40 years eloquently prove that China's development provides a successful experience and offers a bright prospect for other developing countries as they strive for modernization. China's development has effectively served the cause of world peace and development and represents a great contribution of the Chinese nation to the progress of human civilization. The past 40 years eloquently prove that the reform and opening up is an important way for the party and the people to stride ahead to catch up with the times. The only path to uphold and develop socialism with Chinese characteristics, a game-changing move in making China what it is today, and a game-changing move for us to achieve China's two centenary goals and its great national rejuvenation. Only by following and proactively adapting to historical trends can we keep up with the times. As the Chinese adage goes, practice enriches knowledge. More knowledge leads to better practice. The lessons learned in the past 40 years of reform and opening up are an invaluable legacy that the party and people hold dear. They're extremely important in steering China's continued endeavor to uphold and develop socialism with Chinese characteristics in the new era. We must cherish and follow such valuable experience for a long time to come, and must enrich and grow such assets through further reform and opening up. First, we must see the party exercise its leadership over all work and keeps enhancing and improving its way of leadership. As the reform and opening up in the past 4 decades has shown, leadership of the Communist Party of China is the most essential attribute of socialism with Chinese characteristics and the greatest strength of this system. The party exercises overall leadership over all areas of endeavor in every part of the country. It is by upholding the centralized, unified leadership of the party that we have been able to achieve the historic transformation, ushering a new era of reform and opening up, and embark on a new journey of great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, that we have been able to rise above major risks and challenges and overcome numerous difficulties, that we have been able to respond to change, sail through turbulence, withstand the impact of the severe floods, the SARS epidemic, and devastating earthquakes, and tackle international financial crises, that we have neither retraced our steps to the rigidity and isolation of the past, nor taken the wrong turn by changing our nature and abandoning our system. And we have been able to stay committed to the path of socialism with Chinese characteristics. To ensure leadership by the party, we must keep improving the way it governs to better adapt to the requirement of the practice, the time, and the people. On the question of ensuring leadership by the party, a fundamental principle that bears on the future of the party and the country, all party members and people must maintain a high degree of self-consciousness in terms of thinking, political orientation, and actions. There should be no hesitation or wavering in any way. On our way forward, we must become deeply conscious of the need to maintain political integrity, think in big-picture terms, follow the leadership core, and keep in alignment. We must strengthen confidence in the path, theory, system, and culture of socialism with Chinese characteristics. We must resolutely uphold the authority of the Party Central Committee and decentralized unified leadership, and see that leadership by the party is exercised and embodied in all our work relating to reform, development, and stability. No success of reform and opening up comes easily. In the years to come, risks and challenges of all sorts are inevitable. There may even be unforeseen dangers. The party must guide the overall situation and coordinate the work of all sides, remain committed to practicing scientific, democratic, and law-based governance, improve the way the party exercises leadership and governance, improve the party's ability to govern and lead, strengthen the party's ability and the resolve to chart our course, craft overall plans, design policy, and promote reform, and see that China's ship of reform and opening up will break waves and sail on the right course. Second, we must adhere to the people-oriented approach and keep delivering on the aspirations of the people for a better life. As the reform and opening up in the past 4 decades has shown, seeking happiness for the Chinese people and striving for rejuvenation of the Chinese nation is the founding aspiration and mission of the Communist Party of China, and those of our reform and opening up endeavor. The Communist Party of China comes from the people, has its roots among the people, and is dedicated to everything we do must be in the in considering and introducing, we must first and foremost ensure the backing, approval, of the people. We must act in line with our people's aspirations, respect their views, but improving their livelihood. As we lead the people guideline and policy, and at the same time draw strength from the activity and actions of our people. We must see that our people share the freedom and opening up and are highly motivated to contribute to reform, opening up, and the socialist organization. On our way forward, the aspirations of the people for a better life must always be the focus of our efforts. We must observe the party's fundamental purpose, put into practice the party's mass line, and respect the principal status of the people. We must respect the wishes they express, the best practices they create, the rights they are entitled to, and the role they play. And we must fully stimulate and unlock their creativity. We must improve our democratic institutions, establish more democratic channels, diversify our forms of democracy, and strengthen the rule of law and the legal safeguards, so that our people can truly and fully enjoy a broad range of democratic rights that are tangible, meaningful, and practical as prescribed by law. We must take targeted measures to address the most urgent needs and immediate expectations of the people. We must see that what has been achieved in economic, political, cultural, social, and ecological fields are shared among all our people, and that they have a stronger sense of fulfillment, greater happiness, and feel safer and more secure in a more direct and tangible manner. We should promote all-round development of the people and strive for prosperity for all. Third, we must uphold Marxism as our guiding ideology and explore theoretical innovations based on practice. As the reform and opening up in the past 4 decades has shown, innovation is the lifeline of reform and opening up. Just as there are no bounds to practice, there is no end to freeing the minds. Friedrich Engels says that the final causes of all social changes and the political revolutions are to be sought not in men's brains, not in men's better insight into eternal truth and justice, but in changes in the modes of production and exchange. We must base the party's theory on reality and answer the questions of our times and of the people in a timely manner. We must expel any dark cloud or misunderstanding that may hinder or constrain our thinking and action. We must update and popularize Marxism in the context of a modern-day China and make new breakthroughs in developing Marxism. On our way forward, we must firmly follow the guidance of Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong thought, Deng Xiaoping theory, the theory of 3 represents, and the scientific outlook on development, and the thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. We must remain committed to both freeing the minds and seeking truth from facts. We Chinese communists are duty-bound to develop Marxism in the 21st century and adapt it to the Chinese context. This is our historic mission. We must enhance our awareness of the problems, keep abreast with the times, and have a strategic thinking. We must acquire a keen understanding of the nature and intrinsic connections of any development from a deeper historical and broader global perspective, and follow closely the creative practice of hundreds of millions of the Chinese people. We must draw on the achievements of all fine cultures and civilizations in the world, keep answering new and important questions of our times and in our practice, and see that the truth of Marxism, developed in the context of contemporary China, shine with more brilliance. Fourth, We must stay on the path of socialism with Chinese characteristics and uphold and develop socialism with Chinese features. As the reform and opening up in the past 4 decades has shown, the direction determines the future, and the path determines the destiny. To keep our destiny in our own hands, we must remain true and committed to our original aspirations and chosen path. All the theories and practice of our party in the past 40 years of reform and opening up are based on one and same theme: upholding and advancing socialism with Chinese characteristics. There is no textbook of golden rules to follow for reform and development in China, a country with over 5,000 years of civilization and more than 1.3 billion people. No one is in a position to dictate to the Chinese people what should or should not be done. Chinese writer Lu Xun once wrote, "What is a road? A road is made when many people trod the earth through thistles and thorns." Socialism with Chinese characteristics provides a broad pathway for China to advance with the times and steer the course of development today. We must therefore stay the course. On our way forward, we must continue to follow the thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era and the guiding principles of the party's 19th National Congress, enhance our confidence in the path, theory, system, and culture of socialism with Chinese characteristics, and keep to the right direction of reform and opening up. What to reform and how to go about the reform must be consistent with the overarching goal of improving and developing the system of socialism with Chinese characteristics and modernizing China's system and capacity for governance. We will resolutely reform what should and can be reformed, and make no change where there should and cannot be any reform. We must stick to the party's basic line and remain committed to the central task of economic development and the 2 basic points of adhering to the 4 cardinal principles and upholding reform and opening up in the great undertaking of building socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. This is our abiding and unwavering commitment.
Fifth, we must improve and develop the system of socialism with Chinese characteristics to harness and enhance the advantages of our system. As the reform and opening up in the past 4 decades has shown, the system is of fundamental and overarching significance for the long-term stability and development of all endeavors of the party and the country. We have worked persistently to improve and develop the system of socialism with Chinese characteristics. This has bolstered our efforts to unlock and develop social productivity, unleash and increase social vitality, and preserve the vigor of the party and the country. This has underpinned social stability, public well-being, and national security. And this has fostered vibrant institutions and mechanisms that enable labor, knowledge, technology, managerial expertise, and capital to play their full part in invigorating the market and open up all sources of social wealth. On our way forward, we must unswervingly consolidate and develop the public sector and unswervingly encourage, support, and guide the development of the non-public sector. We must give full play to the decisive role of the market in resource allocation, better leverage the role of the government, and stimulate the vitality of various market entities. We must ensure the unity of party leadership, the running of the country by the people, and law-based governance, and uphold and improve the system of people's congresses, the system of multi-party cooperation and political consultation under the leadership of the Communist Party of China, the system of regional ethnic autonomy, and the system of community-level self-governance. We must advance law-based governance on all fronts, consolidate and develop the broadest possible patriotic united front, and promote people's democracy to provide systemic and institutional guarantees to ensure that our people run the country. We must strengthen institution building in the cultural field to stick to our ideals, rally public support, cultivate talent worthy of the times, reinvigorate our culture, and raise China's international profile. We must actively cultivate and preserve the core socialist values, promote the creative evolution and development of the fine traditional Chinese culture, ensure that our revolutionary culture remain alive and strong, and develop an advanced culture in an effort to foster a Chinese culture that shines in our times and shines in the world. We must strengthen institution building on social governance to promote social fairness and justice and to maintain law and order. We must enhance institution building on ecological conservation and implement the strictest possible systems for environmental protection. We must get rid of all institutional ailments and blockades of vested interests that impede development, and step up the building of a set of institutions that are well conceived, procedure-based, and efficiently functioning to secure a more mature and established system of socialism with Chinese characteristics. 6. We must continue to take development as the top priority and enhance our composite national strength. As the reform and opening up in the past 4 decades has shown, unlocking and developing social productivity and increasing the composite strength of socialist countries is an essential requirement and a fundamental task of socialism. We must keep to the central task of economic development, adhere to the strategic thinking that development is the absolute principle and that the development we pursue must be sound and of high quality, and strive for sustained and healthy economic and social progress. Only by doing so can we boost our economic and technological strength, defense capabilities, and composite national strength in all respects, and lay a solid material foundation for upholding and developing socialism with Chinese characteristics, and for achieving the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. On our way forward, we must continue to focus on tackling the principal contradiction in our society, which is the contradiction between unbalanced and inadequate development and the people's ever-growing needs for a better life. We must fully apply the vision of innovative, coordinated, green and open development for all, advance the 5-sphere integrated plan in a holistic way, and pursue the 4-pronged comprehensive strategy with coordinated efforts. We must promote high-quality development, strive for parallel progress in new industrialization, IT application, urbanization, and agricultural modernization, speed up the building of a modernized economy, and work toward higher quality development of greater efficiency, greater fairness, and greater sustainability. Centering around the supply-side structural reform as the overarching task, we must actively shift our growth model, upgrade our economic structure, foster new growth drivers, and stimulate domestic demand. We must implement the coordinated regional development strategy and the rural vitalization strategy, and take resolute steps to meet the 3 tough challenges, namely forestalling and diffusing major risks, carrying out targeted poverty alleviation, and preventing and controlling pollution, guided by the principle that innovation is the primary driver for development and that talent is our most important resource. We must implement the innovation-driven development strategy, improve our national innovation system, and accelerate homegrown innovation in key and critical technologies to foster new engines for economic growth and social progress. We must enhance ecological conservation, keep to the thinking that a good environment is a most valuable asset, and follow a greener model of development and way of life so that our great motherland will become more beautiful and our people will live in a better environment of blue skies, green mountains, and clear waters. Seventh, we must stay committed to reform and opening up and promote joint efforts to build a community with a shared future for mankind. As the reform and opening up in the past 4 decades has shown, openness brings progress, while seclusion leads to backwardness. China cannot develop itself in isolation of the world, while the world also needs China for global prosperity. Bearing in mind China's internal and international imperatives, we have stayed committed to the fundamental national policy of opening up, followed a proactive approach to opening up, and entered a new stage of comprehensive, multi-level and wide-ranging opening up, thus creating a sound international environment and broader development space for China. On our way forward, we must hold high the banner of peace, development, cooperation, and mutual benefit, uphold our fundamental foreign policy goal of maintaining world peace and promoting common development, and work to forge a new form of international relations featuring mutual respect, fairness, justice, and win-win cooperation. We must respect the right of the people of all countries to choose their own development path, uphold international fairness and justice, advocate greater democracy in international relations, and oppose the practices of imposing one's will upon others, interfering in others' internal affairs, or the strong bullying the weak. We must continue to play our role as a responsible major country, support the development of other developing countries, take an active part in reforming and developing the global governance system, and work with all other countries for an open, inclusive, clean, and beautiful world that enjoys lasting peace, universal security, and common prosperity. We must support an open, transparent, inclusive, and non-discriminatory multilateral trading system, promote trade and investment liberalization and facilitation, and make economic globalization more open, inclusive, balanced, and beneficial to all. Focusing on jointly undertaking the Belt and Road Initiative, we must work with all parties concerned to develop a new platform for international cooperation and lend new impetus to shared progress in the world. China will never pursue its development at the cost of others' interests, nor will China ever give up its own legitimate rights and interests. China pursues a national defense policy that is defensive in nature, and China's development poses no threat to any country. No matter what stage of development it reaches, China will never seek hegemony. Eighth, we must exercise full and rigorous governance over the party to continuously enhance the party's ability to innovate, the power to unite, and the energy to fight. As the reform and opening up in the past 4 decades has shown, it takes a good blacksmith to make good steel. The key to running China's affairs well lies in the party, in its commitment to self-supervision and rigorous self-governance in all respects. In the course of leading the great undertaking of reform and opening up and socialist modernization, our party must unswervingly pursue self-revolution and have the courage to rid itself of any virus that erodes its health, so that the party will continuously purify, improve, and reform itself, and have a stronger capability to lead politically, guide through theory, organize the people, and inspire society. Only in this way can the party always maintain its close ties with the people. On our way forward, we must follow the general requirements for party building in the new era, take enhancing the party's political building as the overarching task, and continuously advance the great new project of party building. We must continue to enhance party unity and creativity, strengthen its ability for governance, and make the party stronger and more efficient. We must reflect upon ourselves in light of the requirement of the times, stay keenly aware of potential dangers, and strengthen and improve ourselves with the spirit of reform and innovation. We must enhance our capabilities in the course of tackling risks and challenges, stay pure through resolving the acute problems within the party,
and upgrade the ability for party supervision and governance. We must select officials on the basis of both integrity and ability, with priority given to the former, and based on their merits, focusing on cultivating high-caliber officials with loyalty, integrity, and a keen sense of responsibility, as well as a large talent pool. We must have the resolve and tenacity to persevere in the never-ending fight against corruption, tackle corruption in both its symptoms and root causes, and hold all corrupt officials accountable. We must work hard to ensure that officials are honest, the government is clean, and political affairs are handled with integrity to foster a clean and corruption-free political environment for our continued efforts of reform and opening up. Ninth, we must maintain the worldview and methodology of dialectical and historical materialism to strike a balance between reform, development, and stability. As the reform and opening up in the past 4 decades has shown, a major country like China cannot afford any disruptive mistake on fundamental issues. We have both upheld party leadership and respected the pioneering drive of our people. We have crossed the river by feeling for the stones, and at the same time strengthened top-level planning. We have been focused on both solving problems and getting results. And we have both pursued pilot programs and rolled them out nationwide in due course, thus incentivizing bold and pioneering endeavors while keeping to a realistic and earnest approach. This has enabled our reform and opening up to come such a long way. On our way forward, we must adopt a strategic perspective, develop a dialectical approach to thinking and creative thinking, think in terms of the rule of law, and think about worst-case scenarios. We must bear in mind the big picture, strengthen top-level planning, and stay focused on tackling the major problems in China's development. We must conduct in-depth research, encourage local authorities to make bold explorations, and keep the reform-related decision-making in line with legislative moves to make the decision-making on reform sounder. We must show full tenacity and persistence to see all major reform measures through. We must be bold and enterprising and take a proactive yet prudent approach with prompt yet steady steps to pursue reform, development, and stability simultaneously. We must keep to the right direction, stay on the right path, and forge ahead with undiminished intensity in pursuit of greater progress in the reform and opening up in the new era.
Comrades and friends, to build a solid national defense and a strong military commensurate with China's international standing and consistent with its security and development interests, and deliver national prosperity and military strength at the same time is a strategic mission in China's socialist modernization. We will comprehensively follow through on the party's goal of building a strong military in the new era, uphold absolute party leadership over the armed forces, adapt to the trend of a new global military revolution, follow the path of building a strong military with Chinese characteristics, and comprehensively deepen national defense and military reform. We must continue to enhance the political loyalty of the armed forces, strengthen them through reform and technology, and run them in accordance with law. We must build the people's forces into world-class forces that obey the party's command, can fight and win, and maintain excellent conduct so as to firmly safeguard China's sovereignty, security, and development interests, uphold world peace and stability, and ensure the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. The great vision of one country, two systems is of strong vitality. We must fully and faithfully implement the policies of one country, two systems, the people of Hong Kong governing Hong Kong, the people of Macau governing Macau, and a high degree of autonomy for both regions. We must act in strict compliance with China's constitution and the basic laws of the two SARs, and improve the systems and mechanisms for enforcing the basic laws. We will ensure lasting prosperity and the stability of Hong Kong and Macau, and support and facilitate their efforts to integrate into China's overall development, so that our compatriots in Hong Kong and Macau will, together with all their fellow countrymen and women on the mainland, shoulder the historical responsibility of national rejuvenation and sharing the pride of a prosperous and a strong motherland. To achieve complete reunification of the motherland is a shared aspiration of all the Chinese people and represents the fundamental interest of the Chinese nation. We will uphold the One China principle and the 1992 consensus, cement and develop the foundation for peaceful development cross-strait relations, and deepen economic and cultural exchanges and cooperation across the straits to the benefit of compatriots on both sides. With firm political resolve and a strong capability to uphold national sovereignty and territorial integrity, we will never allow any of our sacred territory, not even an inch, to be separated from the motherland. Comrades and friends, the Chinese people pursue great dreams, and the Chinese nation brims with the spirit of reform and openness. The Zhou dynasty several thousand years ago, though an old nation, still took reform and renewal as its mission. It is in this very spirit that the forefathers of the Chinese nation set out on a great endeavor that developed and shaped the Chinese civilization. Since ancient times, China has seen numerous movements aimed at strengthening the nation through reform, as evidenced by such resounding declaration that there is more than one way of governance, and the ancient way is not the only way to develop a nation. Guided by the belief that all people under the heaven are of one family, and all nations should live in harmony. The Chinese nation, since ancient times, has engaged in interactions and cultural exchanges with foreign nations in a confident and broad-minded manner. Such vibrant engagement gave rise to the ancient Silk Road, accentuated by the pleasant ringing of camel bells along the way, as well as the grand gathering of people from around the world in the magnificent city of Chang'an, capital of the Tang Dynasty. As an ancient Chinese saying goes, just as heaven maintains vigor through movement, a gentleman should constantly strive for self-perfection. And just as the earth stays receptive through supporting others, a gentleman should embrace the world with all humbleness. Such spirit of reform and opening up gave rise to the splendid Chinese civilization, the only one in human history that has extended uninterrupted for more than 5,000 years. A review of the past several thousand years shows that reform and opening up remains the norm throughout China's history. Such profound historical and cultural heritage has dictated that the Chinese nation will continue to embrace the future through reform and opening up. A big country like China should have grand vision. According to Comrade Mao Zedong, to win countrywide victory is only the first step in a long march. Even if this step is worthy of pride, it is comparatively tiny. What will be more worthy of pride is yet to come. After several decades, the victory of the Chinese People's Democratic Revolution, viewed in retrospect, will seem like only a brief prologue to a long drama. A drama begins with a prologue, but the prologue is not the climax. We are not only good at destroying the old world, we are also good at building the new. In the early days of reform and opening up, despite the serious challenges faced by a big country like China, such as population pressure and a weak economic foundation, we never lost confidence in the future and came up with a three-step blueprint to basically achieve socialist modernization in 70-plus years. Such a long-term vision and a major decision would not have been possible without extraordinary courage and firm confidence. In the past 40 years, we have stayed committed to this great goal of ours, come rain or shine. The 19th Party Congress has set even higher goals for China's development and made strategic plans for China to finish the building of a moderately prosperous society in all respects, to basically achieve modernization, and to develop into a great modern socialist country in every dimension. It was the strongest ever call for realizing the Chinese dream of national rejuvenation. An ancient Chinese philosopher pointed out that careful planning and concrete actions lead to success, while complacency results in failure. A great dream will not come true through waiting or chanting slogans. It can only be fulfilled with hard work and perseverance. We are now in a stage very much like sailing to the midstream of a river or climbing halfway up a mountain. As the goings get tough, we must press ahead, and there is no turning back. We have come a long way in reform and opening up, but we have to overcome new challenges on our way ahead. The mission in front of the whole party and the people of all ethnic groups in the country is more glorious, the task more difficult, the challenge more daunting, and the job even greater. In a dynamic atmosphere in which everyone is motivated and driven to get things done, we should never be self-complacent or stick to the beaten track, nor should we ever hesitate or procrastinate. Instead, we must step up the great struggle, great project, great cause, and a great dream in a concerted effort, and we must always stay ahead of the curve and keep forging ahead. Conviction, commitment, and confidence matter at all times. With these traits, an individual, a group, or political party, a people, or even a country would always emerge stronger from setbacks. But without them, one would easily give up and lose the courage to fight. Our conviction in Marxism, our commitment to socialism with Chinese characteristics, and our confidence in realizing the Chinese dream of great national rejuvenation were, are, and will always be a powerful source of strength that inspires and supports the Chinese people in standing up, growing rich, and becoming strong. Comrades and friends, despite all the difficulties standing in our way over the past 40 years, we have met them head-on and grown from strength to strength, just as a mighty river cuts through mountains and surges ahead by gathering the force of thousands of streams. The untold sufferings, heavy sacrifices, and heroic struggles of the Chinese people and the Chinese nation have fostered a mighty energy over a long course of history. Today, such an energy has been brought out and offers an irresistible driving force for our national rejuvenation. turning China into a great modern socialist country and achieving national rejuvenation is like a relay race in which the baton is passed down from generation to generation. Every generation must strive for a good score for the sake of future ones. We, the entire party and the Chinese people of all ethnic groups, should rally closely around the party central committee and hold high the banner of socialism with Chinese characteristics. Remaining true to our original aspiration and keeping our mission firmly in mind, we will stay committed to advancing reform and opening up, and see that our people realize their aspirations for a better life. In this way, we will create new and even greater miracles of the Chinese nation in the new era. Miracles that will truly impress the world. Comrades and friends, ladies and gentlemen, just now in his important speech, General Secretary Xi Jinping made thorough review of the great accomplishments and valuable experience in the building of the party and the country over 40 years of reform and opening up, commended the Chinese people for their outstanding contribution to the cause of reform and opening up, stated China's confidence and resolve in carrying forward reform and opening up, reaffirmed the goal of comprehensively deepening reform, expanding, opening up, and pressing ahead with reform and opening up in the new era. Let us rally more closely around the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at the core, hold high the great banner of Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics, stay true to our original aspiration, keep our mission firmly in mind, stay committed to reform, meet the aspiration of people for a better life, strive for the realization of the two centenary goals, the building of a great modern socialist country that is strong, prosperous, democratic, culturally advanced, harmonious and beautiful, and the realization of the Chinese dream of great national rejuvenation, and make unremitting efforts to uphold peace, promote common development, and build a community with a shared future for mankind. This is the end of the conference commemorating the 40th anniversary of reform and opening up.
This is a live broadcast of CGTN commemorating the 40th anniversary of China's reform and opening up. Chinese President Xi Jinping, General Secretary of CPC, took time to review the remarkable achievements and also the experiences over the past 4 decades. He called the reform drive a milestone in realizing the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. And he repeated his call for all party members and the Chinese to further advance reform and opening up in the new era by promoting joint efforts to build a community with a shared future. And she also stressed that the country would never pursue a development path at the expense of other nations, nor would China give up its own legitimate rights and interests. He said the country's national security policies are defensive in nature, and no matter what stage of development China will reach, it will never seek to impose hegemony over others.
Right. That was a very long speech, a lot of information, reviews of the past, and also looking into the future. Well, General Secretary Xi Jinping has just made an important speech on China's achievements from reform and opening up and guidelines for future development. And now let's turn over to my colleague in Washington to get the perspective from the U.S. on Xi Jinping's speech. Mike Water joins us with the latest there. Mike?
Wang, as you said, Xi's speech, a lengthy one. He touched on a lot of subjects. Ryan Patel is joining us now from Los Angeles. He's a global business executive who has worked for publicly traded companies to startups. Want to welcome you to the broadcast. Let's talk about this speech because he delivered a very comprehensive speech looking back at the remarkable advancements, the historic achievements in the last 40 years of development. What stood out for you?
Well, for me, is the amount of time he wanted to spend on showing how far China's come and where they're going to go. I think it was a reminder, not just, most people take his words as a global perspective. I think he was putting a reminder to the Chinese citizens on from 40 years ago to now. That's a lot to accomplish, let alone if you take any country's history and see how much an economy has come from that far. It is pretty astonishing at what China's done. And I don't think there were many people 40 years ago would say the position China has become in right now. And I think that was the message to me that he was harping on, to say, do not forget what we've done in the past, and there's still a lot to go in the future, and that there is change having to come ahead.
Yeah, and speaking of change, he made a commitment to further modernize and continue to pursue reforms, mentioning that they've introduced more than 1,000 reform initiatives so far. Here's what he said about how reform has always been a part of China's tradition. Let's listen.
Reform and opening up remains the norm throughout China's history. Such profound historical and cultural heritage has dictated that the Chinese nation will continue to embrace the future through reform and opening up. A big country like China should have grand vision.
Let me get your thoughts on just that statement alone.
Let me tell you this. What he's doing is like any other company, any other country that's running itself. He knows that he cannot do the same thing that's led him to success 5 years ago, that they actually have to evolve. And evolution is not just in tech. And that's why I think China is not focused on just tech anymore. They know that they have to be great in other industries as well, and obviously they've done that. But you've seen, I think, the plan and the scheme has been laid out, especially the last few years of them investing in infrastructure into Latin America, into Africa. He knows, and he's reminding everybody that, they are going to be a different China 10 years from now. And I think it's something that I think he and many other top leaders have recognized, that what works today doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work 10 years from now, and that you do have to change and you do have to embrace that. And I mean, that's the rhetoric I took from his speech. It was as a reminder, I think, that he's reminding everybody.
Yeah, it was a remarkable speech in that he walked us through these 4 decades and prior to it, and some of the hardships that China had dealt with. And he said advancements often come after hardships and difficulties. I think kind of touching on where China is today, because obviously the relationship between the United States and China, a big part of the opening up, a big part of helping with poverty alleviation. But right now it's kind of at a crossroads. We've got this kind of cooling off period, a détente, this 90-day period. Give me your sense on how he kind of touched on that.
Well, I think, the way I described it is when you see headwinds, and I think that's what he was kind of alluding to with the GDP growth that China has had this year. Still pretty remarkable, but not what it was last year. What are you going to do next? And I think that is where the testament of this these conversations with the U.S. and China, and not trying to put all your eggs in a basket, but to be able to create a situation that is valuable for at least China and its own citizens. He's kind of keeping the focus on saying that they need to increase its value in the home country, but also still be a global player. And I think his rhetoric has been consistent when it comes to that. It hasn't been just protectionism per se. It's been able to say, help their people and help others at the same time. And that's what's been a fine balance in this conversation between the U.S. and China.
Ryan, I know you keep your eye on the markets. Wall Street, once again, having a very tough day today. Was there anything in this speech that would kind of buoy investors on Wall Street who are awfully jittery about the relationship between China and the United States and the global economy?
Well, you're being very nice using the word jittery. I don't know about that. It seems like there's been panic over the last few days, last few weeks. But I think Not really, actually. You know, you can't really guess how the market's going to react the next day. I think what he said was something to me that was a positive, and it's been a consistent message from him. You know, I didn't get enough from the trade war piece, and I don't think that he should have. I mean, I don't think he did really necessarily talk about the U.S. and the trade piece, because this speech was about China specifically. So I don't see Wall Street going into tomorrow saying we're back to normal. I think it's just a reaffirmation where China is, where China will be going forward, and their plans on infrastructure spending and investment with their certain companies.
Brian Patel, thank you so much for joining us from Los Angeles.
Thanks.
For more on China's economic future and its impact on citizens, businesses, and trade partners, let's hand it back to Zhou Yue and Wang Mengmeng.
Well, thanks so much, Mike, for giving us a U.S. perspective on that. And of course, this commemoration ceremony is not restricted only to Chinese citizens. 100 Chinese and 10 foreigners have been honored at the commemoration of the 40th anniversary of reform and opening up in the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. Robert Lawrence Kuhn is one of the foreign awardees. And here is what he's achieved in bringing China closer to the world.
Dr. Robert Lawrence Kuhn is a keen observer of China affairs. Having first arrived in China in 1989, he appears frequently on Chinese as well as international media, commenting on China issues.
We have to look at the short term, mid-term, and long term. Let's look at the background for where China is today.
In 2009, Dr. Kuhn wrote his book, How China's Leaders Think, the inside story of China's reform and what this means for the future. During his research, Dr. Kuhn conducted exclusive interviews with more than 100 Chinese leaders, including Chinese President Xi Jinping, then party secretary of the CPC Provincial Committee of Zhejiang. The book expressed Dr. Kuhn's interest in exploring the way China thinks and communicating it to the world, especially the Western world. In 2015, Dr. Kuhn became the host of the program Closer to China with R.L. Kuhn on China Global Television Network. It is the first TV current affairs talk show on Chinese media outlets ever hosted by and co-produced by an American. A corporate strategist and investment banker with a PhD in brain research, Kuhn brings his unique perspective to explore what's actually happening in China, telling the real story by asking the tough, specific questions the world wants to know.
Sure. Absolutely. Different opinions is where you get in the marketplace of ideas, you get the best of opinions emerging.
For 3 decades, Dr. Kuhn has traveled regularly between China and the United States. For CGTN's Closer to China with R.L. Kuhn, he has interviewed some 300 Chinese thought leaders and decision makers, officials at all levels, political theorists, entrepreneurs, scientists. Dr. Kuhn has traveled to China's poorest regions as well as to its most developed cities, as he continues to witness and communicate China's transformational changes. Commenting on China's reform and opening up, Dr. Kuhn's catchy phrase is, "When historians of the future write the chronicles of our times, a highlight is sure to be China's remarkable 40 years of reform and opening up." Now he says he's privileged to have borne witness and become part of it.
I'm keeping watch. I'm Robert Lawrence Kuhn.
So let's try to hear some of the reflections from Dr. Kuhn about getting closer to China.
It's a great honor, of course, but what is even a greater privilege was the 30 years that I've had the opportunity to learn about China in all aspects of society, from senior leaders and diplomacy, the big things, but then down to the grassroots to understand the anti-poverty campaign, to see the development of science and technology in China, to appreciate the cultural developments. All of these remarkable factors that contribute to the 40 years of China's reform and opening up. And frankly, as I look at my participation with the 10 foreigners who have received the China Reform Friendship Medal, I see my role as representing the importance of international communications, because it's not so much personal as representing the importance that China places on communications with the world, to learn about the world and to tell the world the true story of China, which is complex, which is rich, which is dynamic, and it's changing. And I look forward to continuing to do it, and to all those people and organizations that have helped me for these 3 decades. I express my deep appreciation to all of them. So thank you, and let's continue.
Well, that's our colleague from us, Dr. Kun, receiving the citations.
Quite an honor for him.
He was there sharing some of the thoughts with us. Let's come back to the speech from President Xi. We're now joined in the studio by Professor Liu Baocheng from the Beijing University of Finance and Economics, and also Mr. Hoffman from World Bank. So, Bert, first of all, what is your thoughts about what just President Xi said on China's reform over the past 40 years?
Well, first of all, it's quite unique that a country actually celebrates its reform path, and rightfully so, given what China has achieved with those reforms. I also value that reform and opening up will continue, as Xi Jinping expressed, and still a lot to be done. And having the centrality of the people's aspiration as central to reform and opening up is, I think, very significant. Third, what I feel is important in his speech is the concern about the multilateral economic space that China needs, but also China wants to invest in to maintain that space as an open world economy, which is important for China, of course, for many other countries around the world. So important thoughts in that speech.
Now, talk to us some of the core values in President Xi Jinping's speech that have been highlighted in the reform and opening up process down the road.
I think I was so much impressed by the fact that he said it is China's achievement is not really dropped from the sky. It's not really the charity from other people, but it's earned by the hard work, perseverance, and bravery of the Chinese people. But behind this, it is really the same people, but we suffered in the past. You know, we also suffered the century humiliation. But why we can really achieve so much in the 40 years past, it is really the institutional reform and open door policy that allowed this nation to have the chance to exercise their perseverance, their diligence, and their bravery to harvest the economic fruit, and also to open their vision to see a bigger world as to reposition this nation.
I want to ask one thing, because President Xi mentioned that this is a relay of marathon. The reform and opening up will continue, but each generation has its own responsibilities, and probably because the low-hanging fruits have been collected, it's going to be tougher down the road. What do you think will be the main challenging thing for his generation to do? Because he said he will continue, double down on reform.
Actually, in Deng Xiaoping's time, you know, as a mastermind of the Chinese open door and reform process, his paramount task was really more political than economic. So to convince those people with all the stereotypes to accept a new model of socialism that can really bring China out of the poverty. And the rest of the economic work was simply liberalization. So, okay, I just let the market and let the people to make decisions on their own. But now we are treading into a deeper water for reform. Now, you know, in the document, the President Xi was reading that there is now entrenched interest groups that are some of them used to be the impetus to push forward Chinese reform, but as they got more and more privileged in the position, they become obstacles that are really obstructing the further moving forward by the Chinese people. And the other is also, now we have achieved a living standard, per capita income, etc. Environmental challenges is really mounting. So we really need to shift into more management of the quality of life instead of living standard measured by economic measures. And now also the government reform. The anti-corruption is an ongoing process, and how we can really build a transparent, clean, and rule of law government. That's also something that we are answering to what is really demanded by the global community.
Now, from an international perspective, Bert, I want to get your thoughts on this. China's reform and opening up has to be looked at in relation to the rest of the world. So going forward, how can the rest of the world learn from China's success stories, or how can China keep opening more to the outside world?
Well, first, I think it's important that President Xi mentioned that China does not want to develop at the expense of others. And that's a very important guideline on what that would mean in terms of domestic policy and international policy. It's a reform program by itself, if you want, both domestically and foreign. Second, of course, there's many countries that look at what can we truly learn from China. And the lessons, I think we're only starting to digest the lessons from China. But this theme that we talked about of providing the policy setting in which people can perform best and then invest in people as you go along is a very important theme, I think, for other countries to follow. And then the specifics of that really depends on each and every country. Just like China followed many broad guidelines from OECD countries, from Western countries, but it always came down to how does it work for China? How do you apply that to China? And many countries will have to go through the same process, understanding China such that those lessons can be learned for their own country.
Sure.
On that question, China with the rest of the world, Professor Liu, because there are increasing loud rhetorics about the industrialized economies being taken advantage by China because of China's growing economy, because of China's increasing leverages in the world. Do you think it is fair, and how to make the balance of benefiting your own people, but as well as giving some spin-offs to the rest of the world so that they don't feel they are left behind or taken advantage of?
Well, the technology diffusion is following a waterfall pattern where, from those inventors that really go to those market-based. So China did really offer the biggest market base now for the commercialization of those technologies. So that's in the first place. Yes, we cannot deny there are cases that certain Chinese companies or individuals were stealing technology or emulating technology, but overall, China offered the market to really to invigorate innovation for the whole world in the developed economy. The second is that, okay, when the developed world are kicking really many of those businesses out of their country because of the environmental consideration, because of the labor intensity. So China was there to do the dirty work for the rest of the world, for the advanced world, in participating at the low end of the global supply chain. So, and then also China is really providing a reasonable quality and cheaper goods.
You said kick them out, but some politicians in the West said China has been used unfair practices to allure them away.
Actually, in the last century, in the 60s until the 90s, it is the environmental movement, that really kicked those, heavy polluting chemical plants and industrial plants out. And also it is their labor movement that kicked some of the, low-paying jobs out of their country. So it is and also there is also consumer movements that are more demanding. So now China does really offer a place that can recycle some of the technology and revive the product life cycle of those, the companies that are supposed to decline and divest.
All right, we'll talk more about innovation and the change of the value chain in the globe. Well, China has made tremendous progress in 40 years of reform and opening up, but there are obviously new challenges there, and how to deal with them, how to balance urban with rural development, how to make sure that everybody had access to equal education and healthcare, how to ensure sustainable development and make technology as an engine for growth. How can small and medium-sized businesses be supported and developed?
Surely a lot of answers needs to be answered. Now, in 1988, the chief architect of China's reform, Deng Xiaoping, proclaimed science and technology are the primary productive force. And in 1995, China proposed a strategy of rejuvenating the nation through science and education. In October this year, CCTV broadcast a public service announcement about primary research and primary education. Well, the video was made by Chinese tech giant Huawei. It's about the role of science and technology in the development of human society. The key takeaways: every industrial revolution is the outbreak of rich primary research. And only by attaching importance to primary research can our industry become strong. Only by attaching importance to primary education can we have talents for rejuvenating industry. And now let's find out more about technological innovation.
All right, let's take a look.
In 2018 will enter the records as the busiest year in Chinese space history. About 35 space launches included the highly acclaimed Chang'e 4 mission. It's likely to make China the world's first country to soft land on the far side of the moon.
中国航天现在就30万左右。
The 300,000-plus staff in the Chinese space industry have formed a set of system engineering management experience. It includes methods, regulations, and also the unique Chinese aerospace spirit.
Yuan admits that China still lags behind some major space powers like the US and Russia. But so far, China has successfully launched 11 spacecrafts, including 6 manned space flights, lifting 11 astronauts into space.
一定要坚持独立自主，自力更生。
We must adhere to developing high technology our own way. Advanced technology cannot simply be bought or given. We need to rely on our own scientists.
And this kind of spirit is expected to be passed on to the next generation of space industry engineers and scientists.
As young engineers, we need to be faster in learning to use all this new equipment and technology.
Many youngsters dream of exploring outer space, and as international cooperation around China's space program gathers pace, more talented and creative young engineers will be needed to join the work. With a stable launching expertise, China has helped many countries launch their commercial satellites. The nation's Fengyun series weather satellites provide meteorological and maritime services for dozens of countries and regions. And China's Beidou navigation satellite system is expected to go global around 2020. Looking ahead, China plans to build its own space station and beyond that, land on Mars.
Well, there's an intent clearly to look at a lunar mission and as well as at a lunar base, also looking at further development onto Mars and Marshall programs. So cooperation is essential in terms of space science and space development, and we'll look to work closely with our CNSA colleagues on that.
Exploration of the unknown is impetus for human advancement. China's future space exploration will generate more advanced joint space experiments and boost economic and social development around the world. Wu Lei, CGTN.
And like any other country, fast development in economy and technology depended on budgets for research and development. Huge amounts, even exceeding many developed countries here in China. But does China's technology really surpass those developed countries? What aspect can be improved? Let's take a look.
Since 2000, China's research and development expenditure has been growing faster than its GDP. This has been narrowing the gap with developed countries. In 2016, the figure stayed above 2% against less than 1% in 2001. For major countries with advanced technologies like the US, Germany, and Japan, it was around 3%. In 2017, China spent 1.76 trillion yuan on research and development, accounting for 2.13% of its GDP. It ranks second in the world in terms of total amount, just after the US. But when it comes to the structure of its R&D expenditure, balance is lacking. Expenditure on basic research or seeking new knowledge through means such as basic mathematics and basic physics was only 97.5 billion yuan, accounting for 5.5% of total expenditure. And applied research, mainly aimed at certain target research, cost nearly 190 billion yuan, accounting for another 10.5%. The largest part of R&D expenditure, about 84%, Nearly 1.5 trillion yuan flows into research for practical use, like the early stage of industrialization. That's because its economic returns are much easier and quicker. In contrast, in the US, nearly 30% of R&D expenditure goes to basic and applied research. On the governmental level, most institutes mainly focus on these two areas. Focusing less on basic and applied research may lead to a bottleneck in key industries. China is the world's largest semiconductor consumer, but its own chip industry can only meet about 14% of its huge demand. Timothy Ulrich, CGTN.
Obviously, China has spent a large amount of money on research and development, but whether the spending money is enough for China to catch up with the rest of the world, that's another question. There were two arguments here. One is saying that China's technological level is already leading the world in terms of many different areas: quantum communication, material science, shipping, and space science. And the other argument is that China is still way behind those advanced economies, especially the US. What is your assessment?
Actually, for innovation, they take three major phases. One is discovery. That's based on research, so mostly conducted by big universities. And second is the invention. So that's more for the R&D, and that's normally supported by venture capitals. So, and lastly is the utility. The utility is really supported by the market. So right now, the funny issue is that the total amount of R&D expenditure is already very high for China, but we focus more on the last phase, which is really the utility, because we do not have the patience to wait until we have the support from basic research.
Is it a good thing for China? Because we are doing different things. The US is making discoveries and paradigm shifts to new technologies. We are trying to implement those things and make it a bigger tool for humans.
That's very true. Because, for example, they invented the internet, but we have the largest e-commerce, used by Alibaba. So that's perfectly true. But whenever there's going to be some frictions between nations. So given such a size of China as the biggest economy and the most populous nation, so you need to have something on your own hand so that you can really reduce reliance on certain unpredictable events.
On that issue, because the latest news-making stories about Huawei and ZTE, they have been running into difficult areas when they're doing business in the US. Some say the trade war between US and China is not about trade at all, it's about technology. Who is claiming the mantle of technological leadership? Do you think there has to be a confrontation in that area, technology?
Well, not necessarily. As a matter of fact, global technology progresses best if research and development is a cooperative effort. But of course, in Huawei and ZTE, there are issues of sanctions policies of the United Nations, but also of the US particularly. But second, there is concerns of national security. And the US has argued that, look, companies like Huawei, you can't trust them to provide for your basic infrastructure such as telecoms.
Do you think those distrusts are justified? Because
well, countries have found ways, like Germany, for instance, has the authorities there have announced, well, actually, we don't see any problem with Huawei. We have the protocols to check whether this technology is actually suited and whether it provides a risk, and if it doesn't provide a risk, Huawei is a good deal. So there is ways of dealing with that. But of course there are legitimate concerns, just like China will have legitimate concerns if American companies were to provide very, very essential infrastructure. But there's also ways of dealing with that, and building trust is one, having established protocols, having established standards, common standards in certain technologies will help. And again, cooperation among researchers will help there as well.
Because my question is, over the past 40 years, we have seen the benefits, spin-offs of cooperation in the technological areas. Is this a turning point that because distrust, because of lack of interest and faith in each other, we will see the divergence of the two major economies in the world in terms of technological innovation, in terms of economic cooperation. Will that be the direction we're seeing?
I would rather say, there are technical issues, there are also strategy issues, but to put China, back into the corner, I do not think this is really the intention of many of those countries. So we are not there to support some populism or xenophobic ideas in China. So that can only harm the achievement by our open door policy. So right now, yes, it is really the rule of the game that are different, and they are different because there are a lot of cultural differences in understanding and approaching a certain issue. For example, the ZTE, the Huawei issue are more viewed by the Westerners as technical issues or technical violations.
As a legal issue.
Yeah, as a legal issue, because they were at the beginning they were allowed to buy those chips and other parts anyway. It's really the sanction issue that they are really committed, and also, of course, there are also certain misunderstanding and mismanagement in the entire process that create such sort of havoc. But I do believe that the world need China, need US, need EU to work together to serve not only each country's interests, but also to the whole world community.
Let's imagine the worst scenario is there's a decoupling from the US. Can China rely on itself, all those leading technologies? For example, 5G, for example, artificial intelligence, robotics, biotechnology.
Yeah,
is it necessary and is it feasible?
That's right. If we are given another 5,000 years, we can do everything. So starting from discovering fire. But is it really necessary? Can the world afford it? Can the U.S. really afford to lose the China market, to lose the collaboration with China, and with the rest of the world? I do not think any sensible politicians would really go to that extreme to isolate a country of this size.
And certainly investing in R&D and of course facilitating innovation takes time, and President Xi made new pledges in this field. He says that China should accelerate homegrown innovation in key and critical technologies. What does it take for China to catch up with developed countries, and how to reduce this vulnerability of over-reliance on their key technologies, Bert?
Well, China is well underway. They're spending now 2% of GDP, which translates into the second largest total of R&D spending around the world. In a number of areas, they are at the cutting edge. In a whole range of areas, they're catching up, but that's quite normal for a country of $9,000 per capita. So we actually feel that on the technological progress, China's doing very well. A bit less so they're doing actually on the diffusion of the new technologies. There, China can catch up if you want fast, and for that you continue to need foreign investment. You continue to need this collaboration that I talked about, so that China can do that faster. But overall, the picture is quite strong. Nevertheless, the world you imagined in separate worlds and separate development would not be good for China. It would not be good for the rest of the world.
Yeah, again, I would also emphasize the importance of education. It's like you are growing plant. Right now, yes, we accelerated the R&D and expenditure. That's more like a fertilizer. So education is there is really there to cultivate the soil, so that we can have a constant and continuous supply of talent to support our innovation or utility. So but so far, unfortunately, as an educator for the past almost 40 years, I could see that China's education expenditure is nowhere to match with the growth rate of the R&D.
And we do see disparity in the field of education too.
That's right.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen, for that. Now, as China further reforms its medical industry, big hospitals are being asked to help their smaller counterparts. This comes as public distrust in lower-level hospital continues. Many patients will travel across the country and wait for weeks, all in the name of getting admitted to trusted medical centers. CGTN's Wu Guoxiu shows us what the government is doing to help.
on the verge of tears while waiting for a lung surgery. This lady was transferred to this first-class public hospital in Beijing from southwestern China's Guizhou province.
The provincial hospital's doctor told me to contact a doctor here through WeChat. Then this hospital arranged a bed for me.
Ling went through the union set up by the China-Japan Friendship Hospital in 2017. The hospital's head says it's a network to share medical resources among medical centers of different levels and disease specializations.
Doctors discuss whether a patient needs a remote group consultation to become our outpatient or if they should be hospitalized.
However, getting an appointment at Beijing's top-class hospitals is not cheap, nor does it happen overnight.
We trust the medical ability in this hospital, but we waited 20 days to get my mother in here.
But doctors say some patients don't need to rush to the bigger facilities.
I see about 70 patients every day during an outpatient shift for 5 or 10 minutes each, but half of them can have their diseases treated in lower-level hospitals.
The government is guiding people to go to smaller and closer hospitals at first, but also trying to ensure that they can access bigger and more resourceful ones when they need to. That's the logic behind the so-called tiered medical system that's being set up across the country.
China's health authority shows 19 million patient transfers nationwide in 2018. More than 10 million were from small to large hospitals, but that number is down 15% compared to last year.
8 million patients were transferred from big medical centers to smaller and community-level hospitals. That number is up 83% over last year and shows the tiered medical system has proven results.
But more people trust big Chinese hospitals than small ones.
I was mistakenly diagnosed. At first, the county hospital treated me for an infection. 10 days later, I went to the provincial hospital. They said I need to be hospitalized.
Doctors first rule out normal diseases and then think of abnormal ones. She needs that process even if she came here directly.
To better build up the tiered medical system, China is training medical staff intensively for community-level hospitals and asking big ones to share resources via the internet. But many patients say the system wouldn't be complete unless it wipes out public fear of small hospitals. Wu Guoxiu, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, China's northern region has long been the country's industrial heartland, but heavy industries like iron and steel are highly polluting. And now many of the plants are looking to clean up their act as planners seek to balance development with environmental protection. Our own Ning Hong went to Tangshan in Hebei to find out.
Since 2013, regional governments have been taking a more active role in combating pollution.
They've shut down plants that have failed to meet the requirements of industrial shift towards cleaner production.
Reducing coal consumption has also been a major move. And according to the Hebei provincial government, the region cut coal consumption by 6 million tons in 2017. Town Steel is the largest company faced with the task.
Since 2017, we've invested 1 billion yuan in modifications to reach our ultra-low emissions target.
The result has been quite effective, reducing major pollutant emissions by 4,000 tons. Town Steel is now one of the largest production plants of a group known as HBIS. Its efforts in cutting pollution have made it a leader in terms of energy conservation and environmental protection.
Our efficiency of energy use and emission standards are much higher than the standards in Europe and the US. Our major plants have met the national ultra-low emission standards that were released by the Ministry of Ecology and Environment.
But it's not just emissions that are on the radar. Mineral powders are all stored in an underground warehouse, tightly sealed and unable to fill the air.
In the past, most mineral powders would be stored in open storage grounds. We built this underground storage facility to reduce the dust in the environment.
it's also easier to manage.
Over 40,000 tons of wastewater are generated by this factory each day. And this water treatment facility is helping to reduce wastewater to zero.
All the wastewater produced by the production process is being treated and recycled here, and as a supplement, it is also buying sewage water from the nearby city.
Needless to say, all of these careful measures are adding to the factory's costs. But as a state-owned factory, Tom Steel is able to set an example by giving equal weight to environmental protection and economic development. Ning Hong, CGTN, Tangshan.
So this question is about industrial structure. I still remember then Prime Minister Premier Wen Jiabao said in 2011 that China's economy was then uncoordinated, unbalanced, and unsustainable. Are we better off today?
Yes, I think we are on steady improvement. After we really embraced the three-dimensional growth rate, for example, that includes economic growth, social stability, and also the environmental consideration. I'm so much so impressed, by the President Xi's speech that he used we shall employ the most strict standard to control environmental pollution. So that's something that's that really depicts his passion and his resolve that to bring up really a quality of life for these people. So we have quite much a learning curve by generating enough GDP, per capita income, etc. Now we come back to consider, okay, what is the environment, what is the Medicare, and what is education that are there to support the real quality life for this country.
Because how China's been doing in this field can also tell the rest of the world whether you are evolving your economy at the same time can keep the life, quality of life good at the same time, right?
Well, absolutely. But you see a number of shifts. You see increasingly services driving the economy and not manufacturing. You see increasingly consumption driving the economy and not heavy investment. So that shift and the external balances have been majorly reduced since Wen Jiabao's 3 Uns speech. So there is more balance in China's economy. Nevertheless, the environment remains a key challenge, and various regions are still struggling with it. We still have bad days in Beijing as well. Emissions are down, but it's still from time to time there's heavy polluting days, and that requires time to resolve. Of course, as the industrial stock, the machines get renewed over time, you'll have better outcomes, and some of that will move to other countries, but hopefully with the most modern techniques, with the least polluting techniques, with the least emitting techniques, because otherwise the problem will just move to other countries, especially the global problems such as climate change and greenhouse gases has to be controlled, but not just in China, but everywhere.
No. Go ahead.
Conventional wisdom is that if you are manufacturing power, you cannot get rid of pollution before you get your manufacturing up and running. You got to consume coal, you got to consume a lot of power. How can we make economic sense with the environmental friendly manufacturing?
So there comes the issue of to what degree sustainability will be upheld.
So, but 20 years ago that may have been true, and if you want, China was then very rapidly building up its manufacturing base, and yes, it did rely a lot on coal. By now, solar energy or wind energy is as cheap, if not cheaper, than coal, and especially if you think about the long-run cost of coal-based power infrastructure, you would make very different calculations now. A lot needs to happen, but a lot of African countries are now investing much more in renewables as their basis for their power supply compared to coal. You still need a little bit of coal for your baseline and for your base load and backup power, but increasingly there's cheaper alternatives and there's more alternatives coming on stream. So that is changing.
Okay.
Also under pressure and frankly, learning the lessons from China. There's now much more efficient techniques, industrial techniques available. Leapfrogging there will help countries be much cleaner in their industrialization compared to China.
All right. Thank you very much. Running out of time. Thank you, Mr. Hoffman, and thank you, Mr. Liu, for sharing your insights.
Really appreciate you staying with us throughout the show.
And that will do it for the special broadcast commemorating the 40th anniversary of reform and opening up in China. I'm Joe in Beijing.
And I'm Wang Mengmeng. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.
Goodbye.